Chapter 853. Beta Persei said that the logistics team could reach C rank. That was already good enough. With a little training, they would have no problem dealing with normal enemies. Yang Chendong was quite satisfied with this answer. At least he nodded. All right, I'll work hard for a while. Train these 5,000 people well, and strive to take a step forward. Young Master has great use for them. Understood. Beta Persei nodded. He rubbed his palms together and leaned forward. Young Master, how long will it take? Half a month to 20 days. Yang Chendong answered without hesitation. Obviously, in his eyes, the internal conflict of the Mongol tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert would begin within this time frame. He wanted these people to be reinforcements and help out. Yes. Beta Persei received the order and hurried out of the Yang mansion. Yang Chendong stayed behind and said to Yang Si, "Send a telegram to Tiger's Mane. We can make our move at Talu. If we can't take it in time, the young master won't blame him. But if we leave Ma Bei, it has nothing to do with him." Yang Chendong didn't put his hopes on these 5,000 soldiers. They were just there to replenish the losses of the new army. His focus was still on Tiger's Mane. Okay. Yang Si nodded and left. Half an hour later, the commander of the Tiger Radiance Army, who was stationed outside Tulu City, received the telegram. His eyes widened in shock. Men, call the deputy commander, division commander, and commander over. We're having a war meeting. And Talu, who didn't know that the war was about to begin, was having a meeting with a few generals. The army had taken Talu as they wished. They finally had a place to rest. But as the general, didn't relax at all. After attacking Xian Manor for a long time without success, they had lost soldiers and generals, and their rations were dwindling. All of these were problems that had to be resolved immediately, and they were also heavy burdens that pressed down on his heart. No, we have to think of a way to get out of the city. At the very least, we have to open a passage that belongs to us. Otherwise, as time passes, we will fall into chaos before anyone else attacks us. If we send out mercenaries, which of the generals will be willing to take the lead? Suddenly, Bo Er's voice rang out. Inside the hall, Gao Er, Hu Lin and Mu Ren all lowered their heads in unison. It wasn't that they weren't brave, nor that they were afraid of death. It was just that they didn't have much confidence in winning against the mercenaries' guns. Rashly charging in would only result in death. The three generals lowered their heads in silence, which infuriated Bo Er. What? Could it be that you want this general to personally charge into the enemy lines? No. The three generals hurriedly denied. Then, each of them prepared to say something. However, before they could think of what to say, a loud bang was suddenly heard. Then, the ground started to shake. It felt like the end of the world had arrived. What's going on? Could it be that an earth dragon has been born? Bo Er asked, trying his best to stabilize himself. The faces of the other three generals were also deathly pale. If that was the case, it would be too dangerous for them to stay in the city. Who knew when the stone above their heads would fall? If that happened, they would be routed before the battle even started. Report. Just as the generals were still making wild guesses, a messenger ran in from outside the door. General, something bad has happened. The mercenaries have begun to attack the city. Just now, 2 of their cannons landed on the city gate and opened up a gap. Fortunately, our brothers reacted quickly and shot arrows at them. Only then were they pushed back. Cannons? Attack. Hearing these words, Bo Er quickly thought of something and said, "Let's go. General, follow me outside to take a look." Outside the city of Tulu, the first wave of sieging troops retreated with brute force. There was nothing they could do about it. The archery skills of the Tatar army were extremely accurate. Although the city gates were opened, they were still able to force the army back. Sigh, we still don't have enough cannons. If we could fire all at once, what would the Tatar army be? Independent Division Commander Xin Honghai sighed. Yes, if everyone uses cannons, what would we be? What would cavalry be? Heavy Cavalry Regiment Commander Zhue Feng replied. From his point of view, guns and cannons were only a means of support. In the end, they still had to rely on the cavalry to win. Otherwise, why would they spend so much money on a cavalry unit? That's enough. My vice commander expected this to be a bad start. Blowing open the city gates is just telling them that we're about to attack. Tiger's mane stood up and looked coldly at the officers below. He then said, "Everyone go back and rest. Tomorrow, we'll set up the formation. Since everyone is talking about the importance of cavalry, we'll give you a chance to show off tomorrow. But remember, if anyone drops the ball, don't blame me for coming back to teach him a lesson." "Don't worry, Commander. Let's see how we perform tomorrow." The officers finally heard the news of the battle, and they all said excitedly. Then, they went to prepare. When only the commander and vice commander were left in the tent, Shibi asked, "Commander, are we really running out of cannons?" "Not much. At most, there are only 10 cannons left. In the future, don't use them unless it's absolutely necessary." Tiger's mane nodded and answered seriously, "Are there no more cannons in the beginning city?" Shibi couldn't help but ask curiously. "No more. The cannons are all transported from Chichen City, and the cost is too high. Because of the danger, we won't transport too many cannons at once. With the conditions of the beginning city, it's impossible to make cannons. The 6th young master told us all this when we came." Tiger's mane explained patiently. However, he had a feeling that the logistics team of the beginning city should still have cannons in stock. It was just that Beta Persei didn't give them to him. Speaking of which, it shouldn't be Beta Persei's idea, but the 6th young master's idea. This should be because he was afraid that they would rely too much on the cannons and break the training of the cavalry. He agreed with this point. After all, there was a cost calculation in war. A cannon shell required too much manpower and material resources. If it was only used in this kind of war, hundreds of cannons might not be enough. If this war continued, even if Chichen City's business was developed, there would be a time when it couldn't hold on. Shibi didn't know so many confidential things. However, he still understood one principle. In the following war, they couldn't rely too much on cannons. It was best to use firearms sparingly unless it was absolutely necessary. Their new army could win not only because of these external forces, but also because they had the strength to do so. "It's fine. Then let the cavalry charge. Our soldiers eat well, wear good clothes, have good weapons, and are full of spirit. The rewards for fighting are also high. As long as the soldiers fight with their lives, there's no enemy we can't defeat." Shibi encouraged himself. "That's right." Tiger's mane nodded. "So what if they didn't use cannons this time? They could still use their cavalry to defeat the Tatar army. Then, they would let the people of the grasslands know that the sky had changed." A declaration of war was shot into the tower of Tulu City. Soon, the letter appeared in front of Hubo. After reading the letter, Hubo suddenly raised his head and laughed. "Haha, you really overestimate yourselves. If you use cannons and firearms, we might be afraid of you. But if it's just a competition of cavalry, then I'll show you who's the real hero of the grasslands. Men, give the order. The army will rest well tonight and set off tomorrow." The letter was naturally the letter of challenge. The letter clearly stated that a mountain cannot accommodate 2 tigers. In order to prove who was the real ruler of the grasslands, the mercenaries were willing to put away their cannons and firearms. They hoped that the Tatar army would not be a coward. Otherwise, the cannons would fall on Tulu City at any time. At that time, they wouldn't be able to say that they didn't give them a chance to bully them. The Tatar army was afraid of the mercenaries, but they were afraid of their firearms. If they didn't use them, what was there to be afraid of? After reading the letter, the other generals also asked to fight. From the looks of it, they obviously wanted to show off their skills. "Good, tomorrow General Gore will lead the charge. I'll give you 10,000 cavalry. You must perform well, and let the mercenaries know the power of our Tatar cavalry." Ha ha ha. Hubo was in a good mood and his laughter rang out like thunder in the hall. On this night, both armies entered a state of rest early in the morning. Even the mercenaries did not train at night. Everyone was holding back their energy and waiting for tomorrow's performance. The next morning, the weather was beautiful. There were no clouds in the sky for thousands of miles. Under the clear sky, the 2 sides began to set up their formations on the battlefield. 10,000 Tatar cavalrymen marched out of Tulu City. With 1,000 men as a unit, they formed 10 different formations, and stood in front of the mercenaries who had formed their formations first. The mercenaries were still in a long snake formation. From afar, they looked like a sea of military green, giving people the feeling that they could topple mountains and overturn seas. Compared to the previous 2 times, the first line was no longer the cavalry of the new division. Instead, it was the soldiers of the Tatar division. The commander of the Tiger Mang army wanted to use the Tatars to fight the Tatars. In his words to Commander Su He, this battle was their chance to prove themselves. Although they were both Tatar cavalry, they didn't belong to the same faction. Su He was originally Agar Dorji's subordinate, while Huboer belonged to the Khan's faction. Normally, there would be animosity between them, and it was only a matter of time before they clashed. Right now, it was just that Tiger's Man had created an opportunity for them. Chapter 854. The 2 armies stood in front of each other, and the battle was about to begin. Before that, Tiger's Man said to the Tatar division commander, Su He, "Today's battle will depend on your performance. You have 6,100 men, while the enemy has 10,000. That's not enough, so I'll give you command of the heavy cavalry to make up for it. As for how the battle will turn out, I'll just wait and see." "Don't worry, Commander. If we can't win this battle, I'll bring my head to you," Su He said confidently. With the elite weapons in hand, the 3-to-3 battle style, and the tip of the arrow technique, he really didn't have anything to fear in the face of 10,000 Tatar cavalry. "All right, trumpeters, listen to Division Commander Su's orders." Knowing that he had said all he needed to say, Tiger's Man retreated to the side and handed command of the battle to Division Commander Su He. This was also taught by Yang Chenong. According to him, no one could monopolize everything in a war. Moreover, opportunities on the battlefield were often fleeting. Therefore, the frontline commanders were the ones who understood the situation of the battlefield the best. They would go all out even if it was for their own lives. Unless it was necessary, no one should disturb the commanders on the front lines. After taking command, Su He was even more confident. He shouted to a division commander, "Soldiers, this is our chance to prove ourselves. Let's do our best and beat the enemy until their parents can't even recognize them, okay?" "Yes." The 6,100 cavalrymen replied loudly, "Haha, come, blow the bugle call." Beep, 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 beep. The blood-boiling bugle call sounded out, and the 6,100 cavalrymen split into platoons or companies, forming hundreds of tip of the arrow, and galloped forward on their horses. Everyone's dust surged under the hooves of their horses, like the surging waters of the Yangtze River rushing away. On the city walls of Teru, the war drums also sounded. After the 10,000 Tatar cavalry received the order, they charged forward under the lead of General Gar. Unlike the mercenaries, they attacked from the left wing, the middle, and the right wing. On the city wall, Huboer personally commanded the battle. When he saw that the mercenaries had only sent out 6,000 men, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. The disparity in numbers has already proven their failure. This time, I will let these cavalry trample over their corpses and let them know who is the true overlord of this grassland. Huboer's words were very domineering, but he had his reasons for doing so. After all, when the Tatar Iron Cavalry was at its peak, even the Wara and Mongol tribes were no match for them. Not to mention, they had the advantage in numbers. He couldn't see any possibility of failure. Compared to Huboer's confidence, General Gar's eyes flashed with uncertainty. He realized that the mercenaries were charging at them in a way that they had never seen before. This gave him a very bad feeling. People were always afraid of unfamiliar things, and that was exactly what General Gar was feeling at this moment. According to him, he should send out 1,000 to 2,000 soldiers first to test the strength of the enemy. Unfortunately, although he was the vanguard general, he did not have the authority to command. He had no choice but to charge with the army while carefully observing the power of the enemy's battle formation. In a cavalry charge, before the two sides met, there would often be a test of arrows. In modern terms, it was time to put on a show. When the two sides were about 200 meters apart, the vanguard troops began to fire their arrows. As he galloped on his horse, he continued to shoot arrows. Those who were good at riding would lie down on their horses to maintain their stability and increase the accuracy of their arrows. At the same time, they could better protect themselves and reduce the chances of becoming a target. Those who were good at riding would lie down on their horses and use this as cover to fire arrows from afar. Archery on horseback was a skill to begin with. Those who were strong could even gain the complete upper hand in the first round of archery, crushing the enemy into a state of disarray. The facts also prove that after the two sides began to fire arrows, at least 200 soldiers fell on their horses. If one looked carefully, the losses on both sides were almost equal. Gore's expression became even uglier when he realized that he did not gain any advantage. He was very confident in the archery skills of the cavalry in his hands, but they did not gain any advantage. He felt a lot of pressure. When he thought of the difference in the enemy's formation and the unknown power, he felt more and more uneasy. Gore would soon be able to feel the power of the arrows. With 2,000 men on each side, the number of cavalry in his central army was exactly the same as the number of soldiers of the Tatar division. This meant that he had no advantage. When his 6 cavalry phalanxes collided with the Tatar division, the arrow tip formation began to show its power. More than 200 sharp arrow tips suddenly pierced into the Tatar cavalry. In just one head-on collision, 4 of the 6 phalanxes were disrupted. Without the phalanxes, the cavalry's advantage was reduced by more than half once they were in a single attacking posture. When they could not coordinate with each other and could not crush each other, where did the cavalry's power come from? Puff, puff, puff. Streams of blood splattered. The Tatar cavalry could not pay attention to their left and right in the arrow tip formation. Often, just as they blocked the saber coming from the left, the saber from the right would appear again. In the clashing of weapons, a moment of carelessness would cause them to be injured or even killed. With the help of the battle formation, the Tatar division immediately made their opponents feel that there were enemies everywhere, opponents everywhere, and danger everywhere. Kill. Break through their battle formation, especially the leader. Surround and kill him. Feeling the power of the tip of the arrow, even Gore was accidentally scratched on his chest. Fortunately, he dodged quickly enough, and the saber did not pierce through his armor. Even so, he was still given a fright. Only after entering the formation did he realize how terrifying it was. He immediately shouted and thought that he had found a loophole in the battle formation. He gathered his troops and attacked the first person in the formation. The formation had a strong side and a weak side. It was like how there were many death gates in the formation, but there were also life gates. There was no doubt that the strength of the arrow tip formation lay in the leader. He was like the sharp tip of a saber. Once he stabbed into a person's heart, it would be like the body of a saber stabbing into a person's heart, making it impossible to guard against. But what if the tip of the saber was blocked, or even cut off? The result would most likely be different. Gore was indeed a veteran general who had been on the battlefield for a long time. He immediately made adjustments. Then, on the battlefield, the Tatar cavalry charged at the arrow tip formation after hearing the order. They looked like they would pay any price to behead the leader of the arrow tip formation. However, there were too many arrow tip formations. Even if they expended a great deal of effort to cut off a tip, the other soldiers could quickly find a new one. There was also the 3-3 formation that could be used. This was a formation that could be formed by 3 cavalrymen. It could increase the power of both offense and defense by several times, making it impossible to defend against. After expending a great deal of effort and sacrificing countless cavalrymen, they did not obtain the result they wanted. Instead, their charge was thrown into disarray by the formation. In a short period of time, the 6,000 Tatar soldiers were divided into over 100 groups, and the number of casualties continued to increase. Gore, who was protected by his personal guards, was also surrounded by the 4 arrow points formation. He commanded his soldiers to cut off one of the sword points, but another one would take its place. Seeing that he was in danger, he had no choice but to issue an order for the 4,000 cavalrymen on the left and right to come to his aid to maintain the balance of the situation. Gore, who was in the middle of the formation, was already panicking. However, he had forgotten that while he was the vanguard general, there was another general on the city walls who held a much higher position than him. He was Huboer. Huboer had already taken over command of the battlefield. He was the one who controlled the beats of the drums. In ancient wars, soldiers relied on the beats of the drums to decide whether to advance or retreat. In this aspect, the mercenaries who used bugles to command were different from them. They were more flexible and could even be said to be at the forefront. Oftentimes, whoever controlled the drums would control the army. For example, when charging, they had to beat the drums to boost morale. When retreating, they had to beat the drums to signal a retreat. Hubo's expression was ugly when he saw Gore's cavalrymen being pierced through by the mercenaries. However, he did not send out any reinforcements. He wanted to wait for the two sides to reach a stalemate before sending out the remaining 4,000 cavalrymen. That way, victory would be assured. Hubo had overestimated the strength of his cavalry and underestimated the strength of the mercenaries. Just as he wanted to observe the situation and stimulate the fighting spirit and potential of General Gar and the others, the mercenaries on the main battlefield were slowly gaining the upper hand. With the help of the formation, more and more Tatar soldiers were being cut down from their horses. With the help of the formation, the Tatar cavalrymen had to face the sharp sabers coming from all directions. It was simply impossible to defend against the attacks. The battle went unexpectedly smoothly. Division Commander Suhi once again raised his blade and cut down his target. Using this opportunity, he looked around and found that most of the remaining cavalrymen were his own. There were very few enemy cavalrymen left. He was so excited that he couldn't help but have a greater ambition. Seeing that the enemy troops on both sides were still wandering around, he still wanted to take advantage of the situation and didn't have the intention to send out his troops. He called for the commander of the 1st Battalion, Gushan. You attack from the east, I'll attack from the west. We'll disrupt the enemy's formation and obtain a greater victory. Chapter 855. Understood. Gushan, who had matured into a proper battalion commander, immediately agreed. He then rode his horse across the battlefield, notifying the other battalion commanders and company commanders. In an instant, wherever he went, more and more arrows were pointed at the cavalry on both sides. The drums on the city walls were still as steady as before, showing no signs of launching the final attack. The 4,000 cavalry on both sides were still waiting. Many of them did not even take out their sabers. They were still holding onto their crossbows, waiting for an opportunity to shoot. Just as they were looking for an opportunity suddenly presented itself to them. A large number of cavalrymen in green military uniforms suddenly rushed out and charged towards them. Release the arrows! Release the arrows! The Tatar cavalry naturally wouldn't miss out on such a good opportunity. They immediately fired arrows from afar, causing quite a few of the Tatar cavalry soldiers charging at them to fall off their horses. However, even more of the soldiers relied on their proficient horsemanship and fast speed to break through the blockade of arrows and kill their way to the front of the Tatar cavalry. Just as the Tatar cavalry on both sides were about to release a second wave of arrows, the mercenaries had already used their speed to rush in front of them. One side wielded a bow, while the other wielded a saber. A one-sided slaughter had begun. The sudden change caught the Tatar cavalry off guard. It went so smoothly that it was out of Suhi and Gushan's expectations. However, since the opportunity was right in front of them, no one would not cherish it. All the soldiers immediately roared, and the heads of the Tatar cavalry flew into the air. Blood flowed all over the ground, and the stench of blood filled the air. Not good. Hubo, who was standing on the city walls, cried out in alarm. He quickly shouted to the drummer beside him, "Pass down the order. The entire army is to move out. The two sides will attack together with the main force." This order was given a little too late. If it was given a quarter of an hour earlier, perhaps the situation would not be too bad even if it was not to their advantage. However, it was clearly too late now. Everything was too late. The 4,000 cavalry on the two sides were caught off guard. In a single charge, they had lost at least a quarter of their men. They had already lost the best opportunity to attack. "General, let's retreat." General Mu Run and General Hu Lin, who were watching the battle, knew that the only way was to retreat quickly. Otherwise, the loss would be greater. Even though she did not want to accept this result, Hubo knew that if the battle went on like this, their losses would only be greater. She could only nod and say, "Send down the order to retreat." Archers on the city gate tower, Get ready to prevent the enemy from taking the opportunity to charge into the city. The sound of the gong finally rang out. To Gore, who was still in the formation, it was like the sound of a celestial being. After a fierce charge, a bloody path was finally carved out, and the army retreated into Tulu City. However, compared to the 10,000 cavalry that had left the city, not even half of them had returned. After 4 hours of fighting, the Tatar cavalry had paid a price of more than 5,000 men, and nearly 2,000 of them were injured. On the other hand, the Tatar cavalry division had less than 500 casualties and around 3,000 wounded. Just looking at the number of casualties, it was an exaggeration of 10 to 1. From this, one could see how powerful the arrow formation was. Don't chase a cornered enemy. Let the new division clean up the battlefield. The Tatar division, retreat and rest. Tiger's Mane looked at the bloody battlefield in front of him with a satisfied and happy expression. This battle had shown the might of the new division. Even though they had lost 3,500 men, they did not use any firearms to kill 5,000 and injure 2,000. No matter how one looked at it, it was a great victory. Su He, who was covered in the blood of the enemy, retreated with his troops. Tiger's Mane and Shibi went up to him and praised him. Tiger's Mane immediately said that he would report this battle to the 6th young master and try to get a second-class merit for the Tatar division. Even though they were tired from fighting all the way, when they heard the result, all the soldiers of the Tatar division still cheered loudly. This not only represented honor, but also represented that after this battle, each of them would receive a generous reward. This scene caused the other divisions to be filled with envy. The head of the heavy cavalry regiment, Zhue Feng, directly rode up to Su He and hammered his bloody chest. "You're not particular. You didn't call our heavy cavalry regiment for such a good thing. You didn't even give us a share of the merit, huh? Haha, the combat strength of the heavy cavalry regiment is very strong. Once they take action, they will definitely make the enemy tremble in fear. As the saying goes, good steel should be used on the blade. It is better to leave it for the next time to make a greater contribution." Su He chuckled, changing from his previous stern expression. Zhue Feng heard this and immediately nodded his head proudly. This time, Su He did not arrange for the heavy cavalry regiment to kill the enemy. Even though he felt a bit regretful, he was not angry. Just as the other party had said, good steel should be used on the blade. He was looking forward to the moment when he would make a move. On the battlefield, the recruits felt the cruelty of war by cleaning up the battlefield. During this period of time, there were also some Tatar cavalrymen who pretended to be dead, but they were discovered by them. Quite a few warriors killed the enemy and rendered meritorious service. As a result, the other recruits were endlessly envious. Everyone followed suit. Regardless of whether the enemy was dead or not, there was nothing wrong with killing them first. The recruits are also growing. Tiger's Man looked at this scene and said with gratification, "Yes, everyone is growing. It's just that can't we give them a boost?" The vice commander on the side suggested. "Oh, vice commander, what do you mean?" "Jingguan. This is the 6th young master's best method to intimidate the enemy. At the same time, it's also a chance to train the recruits." Zhue Feng did not hide anymore and took the initiative to speak his mind. "Yes, the idea is not bad. Give the order to Commander Luzhua and let him know." Tiger's Man only hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Although killing a dead person wasn't considered a hero, it was still considered to have seen blood. With this kind of experience, they would not be as afraid on the battlefield as before. Of course, the Jingguan could also intimidate the enemies in Tulu City. It would let them know what the consequences of going against the mercenaries were. The two commanders agreed, and the Jingguan was immediately established. During this process, countless recruits vomited and their faces turned pale. They felt weak all over. However, just as the two commanders thought, after this experience, they had matured a lot. When they fought again, their blades were steadier and their hearts were more resolute. On Tulu City, Hubei and the others could only watch as the huge Jingguan was built. There was nothing they could do. The sky was already dark. It was hard to predict what would happen if they sent out troops now. Even if they wanted revenge, they could only wait until the next day. Rest well. Victory and defeat are common in war. In tomorrow's battle, we must make up for today's losses. After saying this, Hu Bei-er turned and left. While the Tatar cavalry were waiting for revenge, the mercenaries were also waiting for tomorrow's battle to gain merit. Because just a moment ago, Tiger's man had announced the war god's decision. The Tatar division would be awarded a second-class merit, and all the rewards would be sent to the camp the next day. The soldiers of the Tatar division were naturally overjoyed. In the eyes of the soldiers of the other divisions, other than envy, they secretly made up their minds to fight for tomorrow's battle and perform even better. Under the anticipation of both sides, the moon set and the sun rose. The next day came as promised. Hu Bei-er picked another general, this time another general, Hu Lin, and gave him 10,000 cavalrymen. After summing up the experience from last time, Hu Bei-er handed over the authority of war to Hu Lin, allowing him to perform on the battlefield. In the new army, the independent division replaced the Tatar division from yesterday's battle. Considering that the independent division still had 6 battalions of musketeers, Tiger Edge replaced all of them with Deng Yu's direct subordinate regiment. At the same time, they also selected 3 battalions from the new recruit division for training purposes. On the other hand, the heavy cavalry and light cavalry units stood at the side, awaiting the orders of their division commander, Xian Honghai. The reason for this arrangement was naturally because the Tatar division had performed too many meritorious deeds in yesterday's battle. The other divisions already had quite a few complaints, so they couldn't let a certain division have all the glory today. Everyone had to get a share of the benefits. As a result, the total number of mercenaries for today's battle was 6,900, which was 2 more battalions than yesterday. At the same time, the heavy cavalry and light cavalry units were on standby, ready to assist at any moment. With that, they had close to 1,000 more men than the enemy. One side beat the war drums, while the other side beat the bugle. Both sides started to gather at the center of the battlefield at around 9 a.m. While they were still far away, a heavy pressure could be felt. The Tatar general, Hu Lin, was in the middle of the army and did not charge onto the battlefield immediately. He wanted to see how the mercenaries fought so that he could change his strategy at any time. Just last night, he had already discussed the mercenaries' arrow point formation with Gower and Mu Ron, and had come up with a plan to deal with it, which was to dodge. Isn't the tip of your arrows very sharp and can pierce through a cavalry formation? Then when you come, we'll just move aside. It feels like I'm punching cotton. When you're tired, they'll suddenly attack from the sides and attack your flanks. This way, they won't fight against the tip of the sword and will only attack the back of the sword. Presumably, they'll be able to suppress the bravery and sharpness of the mercenaries to the greatest extent. On the battlefield, once one side lost their sharpness, it usually meant that victory and defeat were about to be decided. At this moment, Hu Lin was full of confidence. Xian Honghai was also full of fighting spirit and confidence. For him to be able to rise to the rank of division commander in one step, he knew that there was more or less an element of luck involved. However, if he wanted to keep his position, then he had to have a sufficiently dazzling performance, and today's battle was undoubtedly the best opportunity for him to perform. Chapter 856. Before entering the battlefield, the commander and deputy commander had already talked to him. The Tatar cavalry had already experienced the power of the tip of the arrow formation yesterday. No one would be willing to fall in the same place twice. Since they had rushed here today, they must have thought of a countermeasure. Therefore, this battle would not be easy to fight. However, on the battlefield, one could not retreat without fighting just because one was worried. This was not something a fierce general should do, and it was not the style of the mercenaries. Therefore, they still had to fight, and they had to be flexible. At worst, they could send both the heavy cavalry and the light cavalry. This was also the reason why another light cavalry regiment was added today. Compared to other cavalry, the light cavalry was faster and more flexible. Once the opponent's tactics changed, they could enter the battlefield as the fastest and most flexible unit and change the situation. With such a backup plan, Xian Honghai was full of confidence. When he arrived at the battlefield, he saw that the distance between the two sides was less than 3 miles. It was time for the cavalry to charge. He shouted, "Blow the bugle and charge forward with the tip of the arrow formation. Toot, 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 toot." When the bugle sounded, the 6,900 cavalry moved. They were divided into nearly 300 groups and charged toward the Tatar cavalry from different directions. Shoot the arrows. Leave 2,000 cavalry in the middle. 4,000 men on the left and right flanks to avoid the attack of the enemy's main cavalry. At the same time, General Hulin also gave the order. It was transmitted to the battlefield through the sound of the war drums. The 10,000 Tatar cavalrymen that were originally concentrated in the center of the formation suddenly separated before the mercenaries arrived. Only 2 formations of 2,000 cavalrymen were left in the middle. Then, arrows rained down from the left and right, forming a blockade, blocking the mercenaries' path in front and their path in the middle. Sure enough, the enemy had changed their tactics. Xian Honghai, who was charging forward on his horse, saw this. Seeing the arrows blocking the road ahead, he knew that something was wrong. At the same time, he quickly thought of all kinds of countermeasures. A sentence that Yang Chendong had once said flashed through his mind. Remember, on the battlefield, sometimes breaking one finger is far more painful than injuring all 10. With the voice still lingering in his ears, Xian Honghai immediately made a decision. Leave the frontal charge to the direct cavalry regiment and the 3 recruit battalions. All cavalry of the independent regiment, follow me to attack the enemy on the right. Heavy cavalry regiment, attack the enemy on the left. Light cavalry, cooperate with us. Use bows and arrows to assist in long-range attacks. Now that his opponent knew about his trump card, Xian Honghai knew that his previous methods would not work. In order to maximize his power and obtain victory, Xian Honghai used all the power he had at his disposal at once. As a result, Xian Honghai would have no soldiers at his disposal. If the enemy had any backup plans, he would need the support of the army commander. However, he still didn't regret it and made the decision decisively. On the battlefield, because of Commander Xian's shouts and orders, the horn bearers at his side hurriedly blew several different bugles. On the battlefield, the situation changed in an instant. The various regiments began to methodically choose their opponents. Tiger's Mane and Shibi also heard the meaning of the bugles. After the two looked at each other, Tiger's Mane lightly nodded. Shibi then shouted, "Recruit Division and Tatar Division, prepare for battle." Xian Honghai immediately used up all the soldiers he could use. As their superior, he naturally had to prepare for a rainy day. Otherwise, if the Tatar cavalry sent out reinforcements, they would really be forced into a passive position. On the battlefield, following Xian Honghai's tactical adjustments, the formation of nearly 300 arrow tips suddenly changed directions, directly charging towards the enemy cavalry on the left and the front. Only the 4,000 Tatar cavalry on the right were left. When the enemy general Hu Lin saw this scene, he unconsciously narrowed his eyes, a smile appearing on his face. He had 4,000 fresh troops at his side, so he could support the two sides of the battlefield at any time. This was equivalent to grasping the initiative. As a result, he was already in an invincible position. Only, this type of smile didn't last for long. Then, a wave of earth-shaking noises sounded. A group of heavily armored cavalry holding 3-meter-long blades suddenly appeared before everyone's eyes. Unlike the other mercenaries who were dressed in military green clothes, this cavalry was completely wrapped in battle armor. Every single one of them wore black battle robes, a black feather sticking out of their iron helmets, making them appear even more heroic and extraordinary. With 3-meter-long blades in front of them, the cavalry dressed in heavy battle armor immediately drew the attention of tens of thousands of people as soon as they appeared. They were precisely the new army's heavy cavalry regiment. The heavy cavalry regiment, as the name suggested, belonged to the tanks of the cavalry. Not to mention the threat of the 3-meter-long sabers in their hands. Just the heavy armor on their body was not something that could be pierced through by ordinary weapons, nor could it be cut through. Their appearance was like a torrent of steel, giving off a feeling of invincibility and invincibility. The moment the heavy cavalry appeared, they charged towards the 4,000 Tatar soldiers on the right, causing the Tatar general in charge of the battle, Hurin, to cry out in alarm. "Not good. They are going to deal with our 4,000 fresh troops. Quick, ask the general for reinforcements." It was no wonder that Hu Lin was so shocked. The appearance of the heavy cavalry had broken the balance of the battlefield. Let alone heavily injuring the mercenaries, they would already be thanking the heavens if they could even guarantee victory. Right now, he could only place his hopes on Hu-Bo-Er and the reinforcements. On the city walls of Talu City, Hu-Bo-Er naturally noticed the sudden appearance of the heavy cavalry regiment. At this moment, his brows were tightly furrowed and his fists were clenched. He was about to open his mouth to send more cavalry, but when he noticed that it wasn't just the heavy cavalry that had moved. Unknowingly, more than 2,000 firearmed soldiers had also appeared on the battlefield. His words were forcefully suppressed in his heart. He knew that if he dared to send reinforcements, these musketeers would enter the battlefield. Perhaps even the cannons that had disappeared for 2 days would appear. If that was the case, the situation would be even worse. General, Muran and Gore did not notice this. When they saw the mercenaries send out the heavy cavalry regiment, they turned around and looked as if they had quickly made a decision. Faced with this question, Hu-Bo-Er did not move at all, as if he did not hear it. He had seen the situation on the battlefield. Even with the addition of the heavy cavalry regiment, they still had the advantage in numbers. Look, there is another light cavalry regiment among the mercenaries. Muran turned his head and saw another light cavalry regiment. He immediately shouted out loud. However, Hu-Bo-Er only replied with one sentence. Even with these 2,000 people, they only have 1,000 more than us. It won't affect the overall situation. In yesterday's battle, the Tatar army had nearly 4,000 more people than the mercenaries. Today, they had only sent 1,000 more, which could be considered as a courtesy. If he sent reinforcements because of this, he would be forcing the mercenaries into a decisive battle. Right now, he was not prepared for this, mainly because he had not thought of a good way to deal with firearms. Since Hu-Bo-Er had said this, it meant that he did not intend to send any more reinforcements, unless the mercenaries sent cavalry into the formation, but that was obviously impossible. Sending nearly 1,000 more people was probably the mercenaries' bottom line. What happened next confirmed this thought. However, with just 1,000 more people, the mercenaries' advantage was obvious. On the central battlefield, the direct subordinate regiment and the 3 new recruit battalions relied on their superiority in numbers to firmly suppress the enemy. On the left battlefield, even though the independent division did not have the advantage in numbers, their formation was complete. With the help of the tip of the arrow formation, they had already pierced through the Tatar army's defenses and were currently executing a slicing and dicing tactic. In addition, the light cavalry regiment's arrows were harassing them from afar, so they already had the absolute advantage. On the right battlefield, the heavy cavalry regiment's appearance was like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves, smashing the 4,000 Tatar cavalry into a bloody mess. The 3-meter-long blades, once drawn, would be stained with blood. Coupled with the strong defense of the heavy cavalry, in a clash of blows, one would be fine, while the other would take the enemy's life. As time passed, the 4,000 Tatar cavalrymen were constantly reduced. The heavy cavalry regiment that Yang Chendong had spent a lot of money to build had a definite advantage the moment they stepped onto the battlefield. They appeared in a stunning manner, appearing as if they were undefeatable. They were undefeatable and undefeatable, constantly devouring their opponents. The pressure on them grew. The 3 battlefields were in danger, and there were no reinforcements from the city behind them. Hu Lin's expression changed again and again, and he had no choice but to give the order to retreat. If they continued to fight like this, their losses would only be greater, and they would definitely lose. Seriously speaking, rather than the Tatar cavalry fighting with the mercenaries, it was better to say that they were training the mercenaries. After 2 defeats, the Tatar cavalry retreated amidst the sound of unwilling gongs. Hu Lin retreated in time, and their losses were much greater than yesterday. They only lost 1,000 cavalrymen, and 2,000 were injured. Although the losses were not great, the impact on the morale of the troops was not small. This could be seen in the eyes of the cavalrymen returning to the city. In the past, their eyes shone brightly, and they were not afraid of the heavens and earth. However, right now, they were all dejected, and their morale was shaken. In the first battle, they were defeated by the sudden tactics of the mercenaries. In the second battle, they had already made some preparations, but they were still defeated by the enemy's reinforcements, and they were defeated by the enemy's firearms. At this point, Before they could think of a way to deal with the firearms, the Tatar cavalry would not easily start another battle with the mercenaries. Tiger's Mane and Shibi had already understood this point of view when they returned to the barracks after the battle. The atmosphere also became silent for a while. Yang Qindong's telegram had arrived 2 days ago. In half a month to 20 days, the battle with the Mongols would begin. If they could not deal with the Tatar cavalry here, they would not be able to participate in that battle. For the two generals, this was something that they could not accept. Chapter 857. Not only would they fail to take down Tala City, but they would also fail to live up to the sixth young master's trust in them. Just as the two commanders were looking at each other speechlessly, the sound of the curtain being lifted sounded outside the tent. Then, Beta Persei, with the rank of senior colonel, strode in and entered the sight of the two commanders. Beta Persei, Brother Beta Persei. The former was called out by Tiger's Mane, while the latter was called out by Shepherd. Beta Persei, who was called out, smiled and greeted the two. On the orders of the young master, I'm here to deliver the reward for the Tatar division. Haha, I haven't been idle along the way. You have to prepare some delicious food for me later. Young Heir did not treat himself as an outsider. He found himself a chair and sat down. He even poured himself a cup of hot tea. He raised his head and gulped it down like a whale drinking a cow. It wasn't until he drank 3 cups of tea in a row that he felt his thirst being quenched. Then, Beta Persei noticed that Tiger's Mane and Shepherd seemed to be a little absent-minded, and their moods were not quite right. What's wrong with the two of you? Don't tell me they lost the battle? As soon as he finished speaking, Beta Persei immediately denied it. Although he had just arrived, he heard the soldiers in the barracks celebrating and congratulating them from time to time. It didn't seem like they had lost the battle. We didn't lose the battle, but I'm afraid the next battle won't be easy. Tiger's Mane shook his head, then looked at Shepherd and said, Deputy Commander, tell your brother Beta Persei about our situation. Yes, Commander. Although Shepherd was promoted, he still had the rank of Colonel, which was 2 bars and 3 stars. Speaking of which, this was not in line with his current position, but there was no other way. He had only joined the mercenary group for a short period of time. This arrangement was also Yang Qindong's intention to remind him not to do something that he would regret if he got too proud of himself because of his quick promotion. Even if there was no comparison of military ranks, how many people in the entire Yangtze could stand shoulder to shoulder with Tiger's Man and Beta Persei? She was very clear about her identity. She immediately reported to Beta Persei the various situations they might encounter next. Beta Persei sat and listened quietly. Over the years, he had been by the side of the sixth young master. He had more or less learned what it meant to be calm and steady. He also knew that without investigation, he had no right to speak. Shepherd's analysis of the situation in front of him was very clear. He quickly summarized the situation and then closed his mouth. He knew that his act was over. Since the commander asked him to say this, he must have his own plans. Thus, just as Shepherd closed his mouth, Tiger's Mane finished. Beta Persei, the young master, is about to launch an attack on the grassland tribes of the North Desert. I know that Fan Yuhai. He's a very cunning person and not easy to deal with. Now that the 3 divisions of the Cold Front Division have gone to the north, won't we be lacking confidence without a new army to deal with these people? Besides, this is also a chance for the new army to make a name for themselves. I definitely won't let it go. How about it? Help me. Help you? How can I help you? Beta Persei knew that nothing good would come out of this. If it was someone else who said this, he would probably get up and leave without asking. He was someone by the side of the sixth young master. He had no right to worry about the affairs of other troops. But this was Ming, so there was nothing he could do. Who asked him to be promoted by him in the first place? Even now, if he wanted to beat him up, he wouldn't even be able to return the favor. Tiger's Mane's face first showed a trace of awkwardness, but then became much more determined. Beta Persei, how about this? How about you give me some ammunition from the logistics team? Also, give me a few more boxes of cannonballs. Don't tell me you don't have it. Although I'm not in charge of logistics, I more or less know some things there. That won't do. Beta Persei immediately waved his hand after hearing this. Tiger's Mane, I won't hide it from you. There are indeed ammunition and cannonballs in the logistics warehouse, but you should also know that the distribution of these things must be done by the young master. I don't have the authority to use them. Otherwise, I'm afraid that if I make a move, I'll be kicked back to the army. Then, I'll have to return to the young master's side. If that's the case, you might as well just kill me. Beta Persei was also a hoodlum. He directly spread out his hands and said that this road was blocked. This caused Ming, who had been holding on to hope, to immediately relax. He looked like a balloon that had been punctured. He originally knew that he couldn't hide this matter from the young master. Moreover, he had a feeling that if he asked for it, there would most likely be no results. What? I let you be the commander of a new army. Can't you play without firearms? If that's the case, then it's easy to handle. You can come down. If you can't, then there's someone who can. Tiger's mane wasn't that greedy for power. In the past, he was just a little boy beside Yang Chendong. He was very satisfied with everything he had now. However, he was afraid that he would fail the young master. He didn't want others to say that the young master didn't have enough strength. That was something he couldn't accept. Tiger's main spirit seemed to have been drained at this moment. Seeing this, Shibi shouted in surprise, "Commander, are you okay?" "I'm fine. I just feel too much pressure and a little too tired." Tiger's mane waved his hand and pulled himself together again. But now, the Tatar cavalry was obviously afraid of him. He was afraid that they wouldn't come out so casually. If they stayed in the city and didn't come out, what should he do? Without the help of firearms, would he be able to lead the cavalry to attack the city like infantry? Wouldn't that be playing to his strengths and avoiding his weaknesses? Wouldn't that be asking for trouble? Beta Persei saw Tiger's mane's worried expression and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. As a good brother, of course, he couldn't watch him really fall here. He could only say, okay, Tiger's mane, I'm convinced. But without the young master's approval, I really can't give you the ammunition. But I have another way. When he heard that the gunpowder couldn't be given to him, Tiger's mane's hope was about to be shattered. But when he heard the second half of the sentence, he immediately became spirited again. "Oh, what's the way? Tell me quickly." "I can say it, but I'm addicted to smoking. Don't tell me that I came here to drink 2 cups of hot tea to send me off." Beta Persei didn't answer immediately. Instead, he deliberately kept Tiger's mane in suspense. As soon as he finished speaking, a box of freshly opened God of War cigarettes was handed to him. "How about this? I'll give you this pack. If it's not enough, I have 2 spares. I'll give them to you later." "Hee, Tiger's mane, you said it yourself. Then I won't be polite." Beta Persei had a sinister smile on his face. "Of course, as long as you can give me a good idea, it's not a problem. By the way, can you tell me about your idea now?" Tiger's mane didn't care about 2 packs of cigarettes. He knew that Beta Persei didn't care either. As the chief logistics officer, if he said that he was short of cigarettes, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. This was just a joke between brothers. When it came to business, Beta Persei also put away his original frivolous appearance. After a short silence, he became serious and said, "Tiger's mane, a batch of new supplies from the sea has just arrived. They were shipped from New Ergon City Head. But can you guess who else came with them? Tell me quickly, don't test my patience." Seeing that Beta Persei still wanted to tease him, Tiger's mane pretended to pull a long face and said, Okay, I won't keep you in suspense. This time, Colonel Tianyu is also accompanying them." Beta Persei finally revealed the mystery. It's just that when he answered, Tiger's mane and Shibi both had a blank look on their faces. They didn't seem to understand who this Colonel Tianyu was. But after all, Tiger's mane was Tiger's mane. After following Yang Chendong for many years, he was very familiar with some of the important people in Yangxie. Soon, he found the relevant information in his mind. Tianyu was one of the earliest Cold Front soldiers and one of the first students trained by Yang Chendong. After graduation, he didn't enter the army or the navy. Instead, he formed a new Eagle Division and was appointed as the captain. When the First Shang Dynasty was defeated, the Eagle Division made its debut. They flew high in the sky and guided the army in the direction of attack. For a time, the enemy was confused and disoriented. They made the trench line that the enemy had been preparing for half a year collapse and made a great contribution. I remember this person, Tianyu, Tiger's Mane exclaimed, but soon quieted down. But he's the leader of the Eagle Regiment. The original Eagle Division was expanded into a regiment. What kind of help will he provide to our new army in taking down Tulu City? Hehe, you'll have to ask him yourself, Beta Persei said. He had already done his duty as a brother by mentioning these things. As for what to do specifically, it was a problem that Tiger's Mane needed to think about. Beta Persei didn't say anything, so Tiger's Mane didn't ask anymore. Instead, he made up his mind. After rewarding the 3 armies, he would go back to the first city with him. He wanted to personally find Tianyu and see what kind of mystery was behind this. As for the Tatar cavalry in Tulu City, after losing 2 battles in a row, they really gave up the idea of going out of the city to fight the mercenaries. He focused his attention on the matter of attacking Xianfu City behind him. Xianfu City's walls were high and strong. It was indeed not that easy to attack. General Chiga, who was ordered to attack the city, had already attacked the city more than 10 times. He had lost a lot of soldiers, but still couldn't take down the city. What was even more regrettable was that the Tatar cavalry could have bypassed Xianfu City and went to the northern hinterland of Biming. However, they were always afraid that the Biming army would cut off their escape route, so they couldn't do it. But now, after losing 2 battles to the mercenaries, they had to arrange for an army to defend the city. They wanted to send troops into Biming, but they didn't have enough soldiers. This idea had to be put away. Attack. Send 10,000 soldiers to General Chiga. Tell him that he must take down Xianfu City no matter what. Feeling that time was tight, Hu Boer once again made up his mind. Chapter 858. As soon as the order was given, Mu Ran and the other 2 generals quickly tried to dissuade him. If they sent out 10,000 soldiers, they would only have 20,000 cavalry left. If they faced the new army, they would not have the advantage in numbers, and the situation would be even worse. All right, you guys don't need to persuade me anymore. I've made up my mind. Instead of staying here and not knowing when the mercenaries will attack, it's better to send them to Xianfu City. Once we capture that city, Biming will be able to defend Wujin City, and we can go straight in and plunder. Hu Bo mercilessly interrupted the 3 generals' persuasion. Seeing this, the 3 generals did not say anything. They only hoped that the mercenaries would not attack the city and that Xianfu City would be taken down as soon as possible. While Hu Bo was making this decision, Tiger's Mane followed Beta Persei back to Origin City. After entering the city, Tiger's Mane went to find Commander Tianyu. He wanted to see what Beta Persei had planned for him. In the largest guest house in Origin City, the regiment commander of Tianyu was discussing something with a group of subordinates in a small war room. Suddenly, a soldier came to report that the commander of the new army had come and asked to see him. The commander of the new army was Tiger's Mane. This was already announced on the military's appointment board, so Tianyu naturally knew about it. When he heard that the popular person beside the 6th young master was looking for him, he did not dare to delay. He immediately let everyone discuss freely and hurriedly walked out of the room. When he entered the room, he saw Tiger's Mane standing there with his hands behind his back. Tianyu greets Commander Tiger. Seeing the other party's shining golden epaulets, Tianyu immediately gave a standard military salute and stood at attention. Hearing the voice, Tiger's Mane turned around and showed a kind smile to Tianyu, who was wearing a blue military uniform. Commander Tian, there's no need to be restrained. I'm here this time to ask you something. I don't know what Commander Tiger wants to tell me. Tianyu smiled. Speaking of which, they were old acquaintances. It was just that they hadn't seen each other much recently, so they hadn't contacted each other much. Leader Tian, I won't beat around the bush. Since you've suddenly appeared in Beginning City, you must have a mission. However, I wonder if you can tell me about it. Tiger's Mane had a smile on his face. Logically speaking, he was no longer one of the young master's people. The latter could choose to tell him or not, so his attitude was one of discussion and not an order. Of course, whatever commander who wants to know, feel free to ask. This Tian will tell you everything he knows. Tianyu nodded. In the face of this person who had taken Long Song's place and become the first major general in the army, he didn't dare to keep him in suspense. Who didn't know the relationship between Tiger's Mane and the sixth young master? Who would know when he would step down from his position as the new army commander and return to the sixth young master's side and become a popular person? Okay, then I'll be polite. Let me ask you. In the following time, Tiger's Mane and Tian Yu had a conversation in the room for half an hour. Then, the two of them came out together and went straight to the Yang mansion in the city from the guest house. Yang Chendong saw these two trusted subordinates in the small courtyard. The moment they appeared together, Yang Chendong guessed their intentions. Then, his gaze swept over Beta Persei, who was standing at the side. After this gaze, Beta Persei's expression became a little unnatural. Of course, he knew what the young master meant. He decided that no matter what the outcome was, when there was no one around, he would apologize. Since you're here, take a seat. Yang Chendong pointed at the two stone chairs in front of him and said casually. Since the young master gave an order, they didn't dare to disobey. Tiger's Mane and Tian Yu each found a chair and sat down. Then, the two of them looked at each other. It was Tian Yu who spoke first. Sixth young master, you said that you want to train the Air Force's combat ability here, but this subordinate thinks that since it's training, it's better to use actual combat as a starting point. Right now, the new army in Tao City is attacking the city. Perhaps our Eagle Regiment can cooperate. Oh, you want to go to Tao City? Is this your idea, or did someone force you to do this? Yang Chendong's expression didn't change, but his voice carried a hint of pressure. It was this faint pressure that made Tian Yu stand up from his chair in shock. Sixth young master, this is this subordinate's idea. Before Tian Yu could continue, Tiger's Mane had already stood up. He knew that the sixth young master had already seen through everything. If he didn't stand up at this time, he was afraid that he would really attract the young master's anger. It's just that Commander Tian also wants to use this opportunity to train the troops. We think this is a good opportunity for cooperation. Yes, our Eagle Regiment also wants to use the opportunity of actual combat to strengthen ourselves. At the same time, we can better see where our problems lie. Tian Yu also said, this was originally something that the two of them had discussed. This way, they could prevent the sixth young master from venting his anger on one person. Little Lu Zhong fell into a short silence. Yang Chendong didn't immediately voice his opinion. Instead, he looked at Beta Persei, who was beside him. Immediately, the sound of someone kneeling on the ground rang out. Beta Persei knelt on the ground and said, Young master, I was the one who told Tiger's Mane that Commander Tian had arrived at the beginning city. Young master, please punish me. Young master. Seeing that Beta Persei was about to kneel on the ground, Tiger's Mane was shocked and wanted to kneel on the ground as well. At this moment, Yang Chendong spoke. All right, how many times have I said it? Don't kneel so easily. A man has gold under his knees. Don't you understand? As soon as he said this, Tiger's Mane's knees went soft and hard. He almost fell down. At this moment, he didn't know what to do. Fortunately, Yang Chendong's voice followed. Since Commander Tian thinks that it is more necessary to combine actual combat, then go ahead and do it. But I'll say the ugly words first. It's fine if the Eagle Regiment doesn't come out, but once they do, they must hit the target. You guys can do as you see fit. Beta Persei, whatever Commander Tian needs, you can arrange to give him as much as possible. Waving his hand lightly, Yang Chendong didn't look at Tiger's Mane, who was standing there. This kind of behavior showed that he was dissatisfied with Tiger's Mane's action first and report later. Although as the commander of the new army, Hu Meng's actions were public and not private, but he didn't report to them immediately after entering the beginning city. Instead, he looked for Tian Yu first. This was a mistake in itself. Tiger's Mane saw that the young master was displeased, but he didn't say anything. His idea was that any apology was not as good as winning a big battle for the young master to see. It could also express his apology and sincerity. Beta Persei and the other two left the Yang residence's courtyard. It wasn't until they left that he let out a long sigh of relief. Then, he looked at Tiger's Mane and said, Tiger's Mane, this is the only time. I won't dare to do it again next time. You also saw the young master's dissatisfaction. Yes, I appreciate Brother Beta Persei's kindness. But you have to promise me that you will take more crude oil with us later. You can't be stingy. Tiger's mane had a perfunctory look, but when it came to serious matters, he still didn't give an inch. Okay, I really owe you. Beta Persei shook his head helplessly. The person who came was Tiger's mane. For this elder brother, even if he was scolded, he would accept it. After only 3 hours, Tiger's mane, Tianyu, and the others left the beginning city with a few carriages. Yang Chendong didn't say anything after hearing the news from Yang Si. He only thought in his heart that he had given enough opportunities and pressure. He hoped that the new army could have a better performance. Compared to others, he was more interested in Tiger's mane. He even wanted to train him to be independent, hoping that his painstaking efforts would not be in vain. In the barracks of the new army, an unfamiliar team of hundreds of people suddenly came. Because they were personally led by the commander, they were not interrogated at all. As soon as they entered the barracks, they were secretly protected. Outsiders didn't know what these people were doing. In the main tent, Tianyu followed behind Tiger's mane and entered. Here, he and the deputy commander saluted each other, and the three of them sat down under a small sand table. Commander Tian, this time it depends on your performance, but I don't know when you will be ready. Tiger's mane was an impatient person. After sitting down, he brought up the business. It mainly depends on the direction of the wind. Right now, we are relying on the heavens to eat. Tianyu also wanted to quickly solve the war here, but there were some things that he couldn't decide. Okay, then send someone to watch. Once the time is right, immediately inform me and the deputy commander. We will be ready. Tiger's mane more or less knew a little about the Eagle Regiment. He knew that the other party was not being perfunctory. All he could do was pray that the heavens would give him an opportunity as soon as possible. On the other hand, Shibi looked at the two of them talking as if he was watching a show. He had a completely ignorant look on his face. It was only when the opportunity presented itself that he realized why Hu Meng would attach so much importance to a mere colonel regiment commander. Tianyu said to wait for an opportunity, and this wait lasted for 4 days. It wasn't until the evening of the 4th day that Tianyu arrived at the main tent. Tiger's mane anxiously went up to him. This time, without waiting for him to ask, Tianyu had already opened his mouth and said, "The opportunity has come. It will be tomorrow morning. We will immediately go and prepare. Your new army should also prepare." Okay. Tiger's mane nodded heavily. He turned to look at Shibi and said, "Deputy Commander, summon the officers for a meeting." The next day, the sun was high up in the sky. In the morning, the soldiers of the new army ate early. They put on their battle clothes, mounted their war horses, and held their sabers in their hands. They were divided into battalions and stood in formation. The movements of the mercenaries were quickly discovered by the Tatar cavalry on the city wall. This situation was immediately reported to General Hu Bo-er. Soon after, a group of generals hurried up the city wall. From afar, the mercenaries' formation was neat and orderly, their weapons ready for battle. What's going on? Could it be that they want to attack the city at all costs? General Hu Lin's face was filled with shock as he spoke. Chapter 859. If they just charge head-on, their losses will be great. I'm sure they haven't thought of this. Gore also had a confused look on his face, and as he spoke, he glanced at Hu Bo-er. What did General Murin say? Hu Bo-er did not reply immediately. After several bloody battles, he knew that the mercenaries were not to be trifled with. He also knew that among his subordinates, Mu Run was the one who understood the enemy the most. His words were always taken seriously. Mu Run narrowed his eyes slightly, and he was also puzzled. Since the general asked, he replied, "From the looks of it, they're really going to attack the city? Could it be that they've thought of something else? Or do they have enough firearms?" It was no wonder that Mu Run would say this. Although the mercenaries' cavalry was strong, attacking a city wasn't a battle formation. The effectiveness of cavalry was still very limited. As long as one's head wasn't kicked by a donkey, they would definitely not use cavalry to attack a city. There was only one other reason. They had prepared enough firearms. Whether it was cannons or long-range muskets, they could put a lot of pressure on the Tatar army. When he heard that the enemy might use firearms to attack the city, Hu Bo-er's face turned ugly. Previously, The enemy had only used 2 cannons to blast open the city gates, giving them a fright. Fortunately, the facts told them that such powerful firearms were rare in the new army. Only then did they manage to suppress their anxiety. But now, it seemed like the other party was prepared. If that was the case, they really didn't know how to deal with the invisible cannons that could deal great damage to them. Pass down the order. All soldiers prepare for battle. All archers prepare for battle. Hubo's face turned red. Before he knew what the mercenaries were going to do, it was better to be prepared. In Tulu, the Tatar cavalry was also ready for battle. Even when they were ready, the mercenaries still hadn't started their attack. They just slowly arrived 2 miles away from the city and waited in formation. What are they going to do? Hubo stood behind one of the battlements on the city wall and looked at the new army. Her face was filled with confusion. Even if the enemy had firearms to clear the way, they would still have to pay a heavy price to take down Tulu City, which was already prepared. The enemy's generals knew this, but they still put on such a front. What exactly were they relying on? In fact, it wasn't just the Tatar army that was puzzled. Even the soldiers of the new army were puzzled. They did not understand why the army would set up such a formation. Could it be that they wanted to attack the city? It was not that they could not use cavalry as infantry, but it was a huge waste. Most importantly, they would suffer heavy losses. The new army only had a limited number of people compared to the Tatar army. With such losses, it was hard to say if they could take down the city, paying such a heavy price for something they did not know if they could succeed. It was no wonder that the soldiers were grumbling. At 10 o'clock in the morning, poise had reached level 3. Many of the soldiers had become numb. They had been standing here for more than 2 hours, but there was no order to attack the city. This made the soldiers who were originally worried couldn't help but relax a little. There were even some who thought that they were smart. They thought that this was just a training exercise to put pressure on the Tatar army. In reality, there was no intention to fight. This thought grew stronger and stronger in the hearts of the soldiers. Everyone thought that this was a show of strength to put more pressure on the enemy. At this time, most of the soldiers were thinking about what to eat for lunch. Suddenly, a very surprised voice sounded in the army. Heavens, look! What is that in the sky? There are people on it. This shout was like a boulder being thrown into a calm lake. Immediately, layers of waves were set off. When everyone heard this shout, they could not help but look up at the sky. Then, 10 huge hot air balloons appeared above their heads. They moved with the wind and slowly moved forward. Looking at the direction they were heading, it was Tulu City. Is this a divine object? This must be Tengri's spirit. In the new army, there were many Mongolian soldiers who immediately got down from their horses and knelt on the ground when they saw this unimaginable scene. They shouted in their own language and kowtowed, while tears flowed down their cheeks. The vice commander also looked up and saw this scene. Then, out of instinct, he prepared to get off his horse and kneel to pray. After all, he was born and raised here. Although he was already a high-ranking mercenary general, some things in his bones would not be easily changed. At this time, Tiger's mane, who was riding on the horse beside him, reached out and pressed on his shoulder. He gently shook his head. "Commander, what are you doing? Can't you see that this is Tengri's spirit?" His face was a little emotional and also a little red. This was because he felt that Tiger's mane's big hand was very strong. It actually made him feel like he could not move. "Vice Commander, don't be emotional. Calm down. What if I say that this is not Tengri's spirit? Look carefully. Is there a 5-starred flag on it?" Tiger's mane's expression was normal, but the strength of his hand did not decrease. What? This scared Shibi. He did not know what was going on. Then, he tried to look at the sky. He found that the sun was shining, so he could not see clearly. He simply took the telescope hanging on his neck and looked at it. When he saw it, his face turned pale and his body trembled. If it were not for Tiger's mane's help, he would have fallen off his horse. How is this possible? Why is there our 5-starred flag on it? Shibi was puzzled. His face was full of doubt, but more than that, there was fear. Could it be that the 6th young master was really Tengri's messenger? That he appeared in the grasslands under Tengri's orders to save this place and unify it? Sigh. Tiger's mane sighed. Shibi was very smart and very wise. This was something that even the sixth young master had praised. But in the end, humans were still humans. Their reaction to the unknown was no different from that of ordinary people. Tiger's mane could indeed say that this was the manifestation of God. This way, the morale of the soldiers below would definitely reach its peak. But Shibi was not an ordinary soldier. There were some things that could not be hidden from him. It was time to tell him the truth. Deputy Commander, this is not a miracle. It is an aerial unit sent by the god of war. Their appearance here is not a manifestation of God. They are here to help us attack Tulu City. Tiger's mane finally told the truth. However, the truth was simply too inconceivable. Even someone as intelligent as Shibi was still unable to comprehend it. His eyes widened. Then, as he digested the information, he said with a shocked expression, "Commander, are you saying that all of this is the arrangement of the sixth young master? The sixth young master can make people fly?" "Yes, you can say that. As long as they follow what the sixth young master taught them and borrow the power of other objects, they can fly." Tiger's mane sighed heavily. Then, his face was full of admiration. This was their young master, their master. Anything he did was so earth-shattering. It was unprecedented. Shibi still did not believe it, but since Tiger's mane said it so formally, he had no reason to not believe it. Most importantly, with the help of the binoculars, he could faintly see the figures of soldiers in military uniforms on the hot air balloons. The only difference between them and himself was that they were not military green, but sky blue. Could this really be the arrangement of the sixth young master? Could he really make people fly? Even though Shibi worshipped the sixth young master and believed him to be the most capable person in history, there was nothing he didn't know and nothing he didn't know. But looking at the scene in the sky, he had to admit that he had underestimated the sixth young master. He had underestimated the god of war. Shibi, who knew the general reason, did not kneel on the ground with the other grassland warriors and call out to God. But the other warriors were already boiling. They all knelt on the ground and kept praying. They spoke of their respect and worship for God. Some people even took this opportunity to express the wishes that they had buried in their hearts. Most of the warriors got off their horses and knelt on the ground. At the back of the army, Wang Si was leading a group of teachers and students from the Yang Family Academy. Now, it should be said that the teachers and students of the First City Academy were watching this scene from afar. It was also Wang Si's first time seeing a hot air balloon rise into the sky. It was impossible for him not to be excited. It was just that he had already talked about the relevant knowledge during his teaching, so this excitement was quickly suppressed. He had already confirmed one thing, and that was that the things taught by the sixth young master were not unrealistic in the eyes of others. Instead, they could be put into practice after hard work. Think about it. If even people could be sent into the sky, what else could not be done? What else could not come true? All of you, take a good look. Don't always say in class that the things recorded in the book are not true and that some records can't be realized at all. Now, what else do you have to say? Taking this opportunity, the first deputy dean, Wang Si, looked at everyone as if they were frogs at the bottom of a well. This time, no one objected to Wang Si's words. The truth was right in front of them. What else was there to say? If people could fly into the sky, what else couldn't they do? Dean, we were wrong. Our understanding was wrong. We were too short-sighted. We will definitely study hard when we return to the academy in the future. Chapter 860. Principal, don't worry. After today's eye-opening experience, we'll work even harder and try to make the things recorded in the books into reality. Right, Principal, we were wrong. Wang Si nodded his head in satisfaction as the voices of people admitting their mistakes rang in his ears. He knew that after today's events, it would be easier to lead the academy's teams. He was even more curious as to where Yang Qindong had learned all this. For a person to be able to fly into the sky, this was something that he would never have dared to think about in the past. The mercenaries were shaken, and the soldiers all knelt on the ground. In Tulu City, the situation seemed to be replicated. After seeing the large balloons in the sky, the Tatar cavalry knelt on the ground, as did the master archers who had been lying in ambush. Even Hu Bo-er and the other generals knelt on the ground. Even though they were generals, they had not received any education and were illiterate. In the face of technology that had only been created a few hundred years later, their resistance was no different from ordinary soldiers. Even though these large balloons were floating over their heads, no one thought of doing anything to them. On the contrary, they constantly kowtowed and prayed, as if their words would reach the ears of the gods and become reality in the near future. Xuanfu City. After fighting bitterly for more than 10 days and nights, Commander Shi Wanshan's eyes were bloodshot. Giving up Tulu City and retreating to Xuanfu had put him under great pressure. It was said that the Ming imperial court had sent him memorials as tall as a small mountain, and there were even people who requested for him to be replaced so that he could be brought back to the capital for trial. Fortunately, eunuch Deng Chong had stood firmly on his side at the crucial moment. In addition, the connections he had built up over the years had also played a role. In the end, he submitted a memorial stating that he could not only ensure Xuanfu City's safety within a month, but also take back Tulu City. Only then did the pressure lessen. However, only he knew how helpless he had been when he submitted that memorial. Although it seemed like the Duke of Loyalty's promise to him, through Yukan's words, he could not let go of this unknown minor character. Betting his life and future on a minor character he had met for the first time, even Shi Wanshan found it too laughable when he thought about it. His actions back then had been too bold. Fortunately, this Yukan had always been by his side. Even after following him to Xin Manor, he was very cooperative and stayed in the small courtyard arranged by him. It was just that during the day, when he went out on the streets and strolled around, he was not afraid of the northern Ming soldiers secretly following behind him. You cannot escape. This was the only thing that comforted Shi Wanshan. Originally, he thought that there was still some time before the 1-month deadline, and that Yukan's life and death would be revealed. However, he never thought that this person would actually take the initiative to meet him this morning. Shi Wanshan was very curious about Yukan's request to see him. In the small courtyard, he met this average-looking young man who was always very calm. In the small courtyard, the moment the two sides met, Yukan said something that shocked Shi Wanshan. "Commander, today is the day for you to launch a large-scale counterattack and take back Hela City." Yukan had appeared in front of him a total of 3 times. The first time, he had passed on the Duke of Loyalty's words and asked him to withdraw from Tala City. The second time, he had followed him to Xuanfu City without waiting for his orders. And now, this was the 3rd time they had met. But his words had also shocked Shi Wanshan. "Sir, what do you mean?" Although Shi Wanshan believed that he had the demeanor of a great general and was calm in the face of trouble, he had to admit that he was more shocked than the last when he met Yukan. "That's what I meant just now. Today, Tala City will undergo a great change. I'm afraid that it won't be long before Hu Bo sends the order to withdraw the troops. The time could be tonight or tomorrow morning. Commander, you just need to make your preparations." Yukan's expression remained the same, as if he was talking about an extremely ordinary matter. He said these words word by word from his mouth. The more calm Yukan was, the more shocked Shi Wanshan was. Last time, he had come at the besieged Tala City on the orders of the Duke of Loyalty. This time, Xuanfu City was also tightly surrounded, and no information could be casually leaked out. And now, this person had sent the Duke of Loyalty's orders. Shi Wanshan couldn't help but be suspicious. "Mr. Yu, where did you get this information from? Is it accurate?" Shi Wanshan asked in a probing manner. He was simply too curious about this person's ability to know about the world without leaving the city. This information came from the Duke of Loyalty, so it can't be false. As for the source of the information, I'm sorry, but I can't tell you without orders. All right, the information has been sent. Commander, please make your preparations. After dinner, I will come to the barracks. If the situation in the barracks is still the same by tomorrow morning, I will present myself to the higher-ups. Commander, you don't need to worry about it." Yukan's face was calm, as if he had already disregarded life and death. After saying this, he turned around and left. He didn't give anyone a chance to ask him any questions. He only left Shi Wanshan with a thoughtful and mysterious back view. If one said that Yukan was spouting nonsense, then he had taken out his own head as a guarantee. But if one said that he was always accurate, then where did the information come from? Shirwanshan couldn't figure it out. After a long time, he shook his head and said to the bodyguards outside the courtyard, "Quick, go call Eunuch Ding, General Gu, and General Ning to the residence." Above Tulu City's skies, the 10 hot air balloons already appeared one after another. They intentionally lowered their altitude, only 100 meters above, beyond the range of a bow's firing range. Then, they began to toss down sealed wooden barrels that they had prepared beforehand. At a distance of more than 100 meters, some people with good eyesight could faintly see the scene above the balloons. They could see some people moving around, and they could even see the bright 5-star army flag fluttering in the wind. What's going on? Why do I seem to see the flag of the mercenaries? Yes, I seem to see it too. What? How is this possible? Heavens! Don't tell me that even Longevity Heaven is loyal to the mercenaries. If that's the case, then we are going against the mercenaries. Aren't we disobeying? No one said the following words, but everyone knew what they wanted to say. Even the Everlasting Heaven wanted to hire mercenaries. If that was the case, wouldn't their actions be against the will of the heavens? The Tatar cavalrymen, who had no scientific knowledge, were feudal in their hearts and believed in the gods, had already turned pale. The morale of the 20,000 soldiers was greatly shaken. Unknowingly, General Hu Bo-er had stood up. Obviously, he was suspicious of the balloons in the sky. He had heard about the gods from the old man, and in all kinds of legends, there were even stories of the gods manifesting themselves. However, there was no way to verify it. When he asked the people involved, the answers were ambiguous. It was impossible to not believe it, but also impossible to believe it completely. However, in all kinds of legends, he had never heard of a god transforming into a balloon. Now that he heard the soldiers say that there were people moving around on the balloons, and there were even flags of the mercenaries, he became even more suspicious. His first reaction was that this was a trick of the mercenaries. But how did they do it? How did they send such a big balloon up into the sky? This was not something that could be done by humans, right? The discussions of the soldiers did not try to avoid him, the great general. Many of the words were clearly heard by Hu Bo-er, and it was because of this that his expression became increasingly ugly. Their morale was shaken. If the mercenaries were to launch an attack now, how much combat power would they have left? Just as Hu Bo-er felt that the situation was not good, he felt a chill in his heart. There was finally some movement from the balloons, and they began to throw things down. Wooden barrels fell from the sky, heading towards Tulu City. Thump, 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 thump. Every time it fell, there would be a huge explosion. Then, the barrel would explode, and a pool of crude oil would flow in the city. The air was filled with a pungent smell. Falling from a high altitude, the large balloon kept moving slowly. Every time it fell, the landing point of the wooden barrels would be different, causing the liquid in the barrels to spread everywhere. Some of them even landed on top of the soldiers' heads. If they hadn't reacted quickly enough, they would have been crushed to death by the impact. Although no one was hit, the liquid in the bucket inevitably splashed on their bodies. When the soldiers came into close contact with the liquid, some experienced and knowledgeable veterans immediately said, why does this smell like crude oil? This is crude oil. It has appeared in the grasslands before. This thing cannot be touched by fire, or else it will be impossible to put it out. Another older soldier said with certainty, "What? Crude oil?" Hu Bo-er's face suddenly turned frighteningly pale. He immediately thought of the words fire attack. Then, he jumped up and shouted, "Everyone, stay away from the fire seed. You must not see fire in the city. You must not see fire." Hu Bo-er's reaction was quick, but unfortunately, in the face of the crude oil falling from the sky, his shout was not enough to stop the tragedy that followed. Especially when a wooden barrel fell beside the kitchen of the army, a huge fire suddenly rose. In just a short moment, the nearby area was dyed red. Chapter 861. When the fire appeared, it borrowed the strength of the wind. When it came into contact with the oil in the air and on the ground, the fire began to spread at a very fast speed. In many places, the fire was connected to one another. It looked like it was going to spread to the entire city and could not be contained. Such a conflagration was fatal to the Tatar horsemen in the city. When the fire was everywhere, the first to be frightened were the war horses that were still in the stables. Animals were afraid of fire. When the fire came at them, even the docile war horses could not endure it. They had no choice but to fiercely neigh. Their bodies surged, and they forcefully jumped out of the wooden stakes and galloped on the streets. When they encountered the Tatar soldiers, they didn't listen to their advice and continued to charge forward. Even if they knocked the soldiers who blocked their way to the ground, they still couldn't stop the momentum of their charge. The neighing of war horses could be heard everywhere. When the fire gradually grew bigger and started to connect together, some soldiers could not avoid being surrounded by the fire. Then, extremely miserable screams rang out. The entire city was thrown into chaos in an instant. The soldiers on the city gate tower were relatively lucky. No wooden barrels fell on them. But just because they were fine, it did not mean that they were fine. When they saw the fire devouring their war horses, their companions, and even the entire city, some of them could not help but cry out. This is the punishment of the gods for making an enemy out of the mercenaries. This is heavenly punishment. We cannot control it. Brothers, let us surrender and lessen the wrath of the gods. We surrender. We are willing to atone for our sins. When the voices were heard, more and more Tatar soldiers knelt on the ground and cried out. There were even some who rushed down the city walls. They wanted to open the city gates and rush to the foot of the mercenaries to repent and atone for their sins with actions. Bastards, what are you doing? You are not allowed to open the city gates, and you are not allowed to surrender? Men, kill all those who have lost their minds. Kill them all. Seeing that the situation was in chaos and that the soldiers on the city walls were not listening to their general's orders, Hubo-Er's face was ashen. As the shouts rang out, some of the soldiers who were still clear-headed rushed to the side of the inner city gate with their blades. When they faced their companions who had already gone mad, they first tried to dissuade them, but when it was useless, they swung their blades and cut them down. However, the number of personal guards was still too few, while the number of soldiers who had gone crazy was too many. It had already become a general trend, and there was no way to stop it. Seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, Mu-Ran, Hu-Lin, Gao-Er, and the other generals brought their soldiers and rushed in front of Hubo-Er. General, this is the will of the heavens. We cannot go against it. Please retreat. Hubo-Er didn't want to admit defeat, but he didn't have any other choice. In the end, he spat out a word with great difficulty: retreat. Hubo-Er knew that there was nothing they could do about it. They could only rush out of the city and wait for a chance to make a comeback. Before leaving the city, he did not forget about General Chiga and the 10,000 Tatar cavalrymen who were attacking the city at Xuanfu City. Quick, send a horse to inform General Chiga to retreat as soon as possible. Hubo-Er gathered his personal guards and around 5,000 Tatar cavalry, making a total of 6,000 people. When the surrendered soldiers opened the city gates, Hubo-Er led his soldiers out. The new soldiers waiting at the city gates had already woken up from their initial shock. Under the orders of the battalion commander, company commander, and platoon commander, they all got on their horses and prepared for battle. When they saw the raging fire in the city, countless grassland warriors were shocked. At the same time, they thought that the god of war was indeed a messenger sent by the immortal heaven. Even the heavens were willing to help him. They really didn't know who else could be his opponent. The city was ablaze, and the gates outside the city were wide open. Then, countless Tatar cavalry rushed out. As soon as they appeared, they charged over in a frenzy. It seemed that they wanted to fight to the death with the mercenaries. Blow the bugle call, kill the enemy. Tiger's Mane saw that the situation was set, so he opened his mouth and gave the order to attack. The high-spirited and high-spirited mercenary soldiers immediately swarmed forward in units of battalions. They launched a deadly attack at the remnants of the Tatar cavalry that had charged out. The cavalry of both sides soon clashed within 2 miles of the city gates. The new army, which had the upper hand in both strength and morale, pierced through the enemy cavalry formation after just a few exchanges, causing the enemy to throw away their armor and flee in utter defeat. "General, let's go. I'll cover the rear," Gore called out, and then he led his personal guards and the 1,000 or so Tatar cavalry to form a human wall, blocking Hu Bo-er and the others from escaping. In the current situation, it was clearly impossible for all of them to escape. Only a portion of them might still have a chance. Gower stayed behind of his own accord, causing tears to well up in Hu Bo-er's eyes. He knew what would happen if he made this decision, but he didn't have any other choice. "Let's go." After a moment of hesitation, Hu Bo-er whipped his horse. Under the protection of Mu Rian, Hu Lin, and several hundred personal guards, they finally broke out of the encirclement of the new army and headed southwest. General Gower, who was left behind with over 1,000 cavalry, was only able to hold out for less than an hour before they were completely annihilated. Among them, Gower was slain by over a dozen blades, thus announcing the great defeat of the Tatar cavalry and the glorious victory of the new army. In this battle, the great fire in the city had killed more than 1,000 Tatar soldiers, injured more than 2,000, and killed 3,000 enemy cavalry. Hu Bo-er fled with a few generals and 500 cavalry. The threat of the Tatar cavalry had disappeared, and they fled in defeat. Clean up the battlefield and make preparations. There's still a big fish coming. Seeing that the sun was setting, Tiger's Mane ordered the cooks to cook while ordering the army to take turns to rest and prepare for the upcoming battle. On the walls of the Xuanfu city, Shi Wanshan was in a corner of the city gate tower, facing Dengchong, Ancient River, and Ning Wenfeng. He had already informed the three of Yukan's arrival during the day, but the four of them had discussed it for a long time without coming to a conclusion. They all had the same question. How did Yukan find out about the news outside with the 4 gates of the Xuanfu city closed? After the incident at Tulu City, Ning Wenfeng had increased the patrols in the city. Even a bird would be discovered if it flew into the city. However, they had not received any reports. So where did the news come from? There was also another question. Why did Yukan say that the Tatar cavalry would retreat? Would they really be so obedient and retreat? Since they could not think of a reason, they decided not to think about it. The 4 of them had already arrived at the city gate tower. They ate and drank here, waiting for the situation to change. A pair of chopsticks picked up a mouthful of food. Gu He, who had just recovered from his injuries, put it into his mouth and said, "Commander, do you think we've been played by that Yukan guy?" He suddenly gathered the entire army. If the news is false, wouldn't we have wasted our efforts? That's right. If this incident were to be reported to the court by someone with ulterior motives, who knows how many people would impeach us? The eunuch, Deng Chong, also nodded in agreement. He did not care if the soldiers were tired or how many soldiers died. He only cared about one thing, and that was how the court viewed them. This would directly affect the emperor's attitude towards him and his future. Hearing the questioning voices of the two, Shi Wanshan said with a heavy expression, "To be honest, I don't know how much of Yukan's words are true. However, since he was willing to bet his life, it should not be false." "Oh, right. Did Yukan come?" "He's here." The one who answered him was the commander, Ning Wenfeng. He came as soon as the sky turned dark. He found that my people were watching his every move. If the news this time is false, he definitely won't be able to live. Good. Shi Wanshan nodded. Since he dares to gamble with his life, what harm is there in playing with him? Let's wait. At the latest, we'll know before daybreak tomorrow. Shi Wanshan gave the deadline for daybreak. However, they did not wait until midnight. The Tatar cavalry below the city walls began to move. General Chiga had already received the fast horse scouts sent by Hu Bo-er and learned of the fire in Tulu City. With their retreat cut off, there would be no more reinforcements or food. They might even have to face the appearance of mercenaries. When that time came, they would be attacked from both sides and would definitely lose. At this moment, there seemed to be no other choice but to retreat. Pass down my orders. Move out one by one. Try not to make any noise, especially not to alarm Baiming's army. Chiga summoned his generals and gave them the order to retreat. However, he was careful not to mention Hu Bo-er's defeat. He only said that General Chiga was going to fight a decisive battle with the mercenaries and did not have enough troops. The Tatar cavalry, who were not adept at sieges, had long grown tired of Xuanfu City. Now that they had a chance to leave this place, naturally no one objected. All of them happily agreed and began to retreat according to the plan. The Tatar army had been very careful with their retreat. Normally, they would have been able to retreat without being discovered in the middle of the night. However, things were different now. They had already sent out dozens of scouts to keep an eye on them. The moment they moved, the news was immediately sent to Shi Wanshan. They really moved? Hearing the scouts' report, Shi Wanshan's face was filled with astonishment. Deng Chong and the others were also shocked. Their expressions were written all over their faces. Chapter 862. How did you can obtain such information? If they didn't figure this out, wouldn't it mean that their every move under the sun was being watched by others? How could there be any secrets? Why don't we send someone to capture this you can and use some methods? I don't believe that he won't talk. Ancient River said with a ferocious face. Clearly, he also felt the threat. No. Ning Wenfeng shook his head and rejected. You should be one of the Duke of Loyalty without a doubt, and it's hard to guarantee that there's a second you can beside us. If we touch him like this, once the news spreads, the Duke of Loyalty will punish us for treating our benefactor like this. If because of this, Tulu City won't be given to us and even attracted the mercenary army to become our enemy, the consequences are not something we can bear. At that time, even if we die, we will be regarded as sinners and our families will suffer. Ancient River originally wanted to say something, but he suddenly realized that he had nothing to say. That's right, we can't touch this you can. Not only can we not touch him, we have to treat him well. Eunuch Deng Chong also expressed his attitude. He didn't care if he was being targeted or not. What he wanted was to win the battle and take back Tulu City. This way, he would have an explanation to the emperor. Even if things were settled, he would definitely leave this place one day. Why should he anger the Duke of Loyalty? Wouldn't that be looking for trouble? Since the two of them didn't support touching Yukan, Ancient River knew that his suggestion had failed. He simply changed the topic and said, since the Tatar army has really started to retreat, when will we attack? Half an hour later. Let's wait for some of them to leave first. Since they are so weak, it will be the best time for us to make a move. When we make our move, we will spread the news of Tulu City's defeat and disrupt their morale. Shi Wanshan finally opened his mouth and decided the matter. Although he didn't know why the Tatar cavalry retreated, he thought that it must be related to the situation in Tulu City. It must be because the situation there was critical that they had to retreat. Since that was the case, he naturally had to add fuel to the fire. He wasn't naive enough to think that the Tatar general would tell the soldiers the truth. All right, if you don't want to talk about it, I'll talk about it. Okay. Shi Wanshan's decision was supported by the other three. Immediately, everyone went to arrange the troops to make the final preparations before the surprise attack. At around 2 in the morning, under General Chiga's arrangements, the 5,000 Tatar cavalry had retreated far away, and the 10,000 cavalry were also preparing to break camp and retreat. In comparison, among the remaining 10,000 cavalrymen, there were 3,000 who were injured. Chigo had deliberately arranged for these people to be the last. His intention was very obvious. Once the northern Ming army discovered the fact that they had retreated, if they sent troops to chase after them, these 3,000 people would be left as the rear guard. After all, they were all injured. Fighting to the death on the battlefield would be the greatest expression of their value. However, Chigu had never expected that his every move would be discovered by the Baiming army. Before he could arrange for more people to retreat, the gates of Xuanfu City suddenly opened, and tens of thousands of Baiming army soldiers charged out. At the very front was the 3,000 cavalrymen led by General Ancient River. This was a new group of cavalrymen made up of old soldiers and new recruits. As soon as they appeared, they held torches and shouted loudly, saying that Tulu City had been occupied by the mercenaries, and that the Tatar army had lost, so they charged out and caught Chiga off guard. Seeing the countless torches appear, and seeing that the army was in chaos, Chiga gritted his teeth and made a ruthless decision. Retreat. Retreat as much as you can. With that, he led the 2,000 cavalrymen to retreat. After Chiga escaped, the remaining Tatar army became a group of people without a leader. Facing the pursuit of the Baiming army, they only put up a symbolic resistance, and then they either surrendered or knelt on the ground, becoming captives of the Baiming army. It was only a charge, but they actually obtained 7,000 captives. Shi Wanshan was naturally overjoyed. This was definitely a great victory, and once this was reported to the emperor, he would definitely be promoted. Haha, good good. Eunuch Deng Chang's joy and anger were written all over his face. His smile was so wide that it could squeeze millions of mosquitoes and flies to death. Eunuch Deng, Wenfeng, I'll leave this place to you. I'll continue to pursue the enemy with General Ancient River and strive to obtain more and take back Tulu City. Shi Wanshan rode his horse to Deng Chang and Ning Wenfeng's side and said in a hurried tone, Good, good. General Shi, go ahead. Leave this place to me. Deng Chang, who was already so happy that he couldn't tell north from south, naturally agreed. Immediately, Shi Wanshan led the main force under his banner and began to pursue the enemy through the night. Because most of his troops were infantrymen, their speed was limited. The ones that could really play a role were the 3,000 cavalrymen led by Ancient River. However, these 3,000 cavalrymen were also attacked by the Tatar cavalry along the way. This was the gift Chiga had left for the Ming army. At this moment, the first group of 5,000 cavalrymen from the Xian mansion finally arrived at the foot of Tulu City. The city before them had already been scorched by fire. The 5,000 cavalrymen couldn't believe that this was the city they had left not long ago. But what was even more unexpected was that after the bugle call to charge, many mercenaries suddenly appeared all around them. They split into several directions and surrounded the cavalrymen. Under a direct attack, the panicked Tatar cavalry announced that their battle formation had collapsed. Apart from less than 1,000 men who managed to charge out, the rest were either killed or captured. The new army had once again performed a meritorious service. Quickly clean up the battlefield. There will be more enemies coming. Commander Tiger's Ming commanded the army to collect the enemy corpses and draw in the horses in an orderly manner. The Falcon Regiment's actions were truly extraordinary. Not only did they burn down Tulu City, they also greatly raised the morale of the new army. Who didn't know that even God was willing to help the war god? For the grassland warriors who were deeply superstitious, this would make them believe that Yang Chendong was Changtian's messenger even more. This would play an immeasurable role in rallying the morale of the army. About 4 to 6 hours later, in the afternoon, Chiga, who was leading 1,000 Tatar cavalry that had fled in a sorry state, appeared. As soon as he entered the city, he saw the dilapidated city and the countless mercenary cavalrymen in front of him. He knew that it was impossible for him to escape this place alive. Chiga, who Boer has already escaped. The 5,000 cavalrymen you sent out have also been captured. There is only one path before you. Surrender, or you will be spared. If you don't surrender, you will die. Deputy Commander Shibi rode on his horse and appeared in front of the new army. You want to persuade me to surrender? Chiga looked at Shibi, who was half Mongol, with an inexplicable look in his eyes. Just like how the mercenaries wanted to understand the situation of the Tatar cavalrymen, they also wanted to understand the situation of the new army. As the deputy commander, Shibi was naturally the target of their research. This person was actually a former general of the Tatar army, and one who had surrendered. It was hard to understand how such a person could be used by the war god, and even be promoted to such a high position. It was impossible to say that Chiga did not have any envy and jealousy in his heart. However, he would not choose to walk down the same path. Perhaps this was because people had different lives, or perhaps it was because the world was so wonderful. There had to be different choices to lead a different life. That's right. I want to persuade you to surrender. Speaking of which, General Chiga is also a talent. He's been in the Tatar army for too long. If you can work for the war god, I can guarantee you a high position and a good salary. How about it? At the same time, these words were undoubtedly more realistic when spoken by someone who had personally experienced it. However, not everyone was willing to surrender. Chiga's character was one of those who would rather break than bend. Perhaps his ability was limited, or perhaps his personal strength was average, but his character was still very stubborn. Shibi, don't think that just because you surrendered to the Han people, we are all soft. Let me tell you, if you want to persuade me to surrender, there is no way. If you have the ability, then come and kill me. Otherwise, just wait for me to kill you. Heis. A sigh sounded, and it was because of Chiga's actions. Then, Shibi slowly raised his right hand and slammed it down. On both sides of him, countless cavalrymen in green rushed forward. Kill! Chiga also roared and led 1,000 cavalrymen to meet the enemy head-on. However, whether it was the morale of the troops or the numbers, the Tatar cavalrymen who were at a disadvantage only lasted for an hour before collapsing. Then, they were surrounded, and those who would rather die than surrender would be killed. Surrendering would allow them to live. 4 hours later, more than 2,000 cavalrymen came from the direction of the Xian mansion. It was Ancient River's army. They chased the enemy all the way from the Xian mansion to Tulu City, but they were still a step too late. When they arrived, they saw the already dead Chiga and the mercenaries cleaning up the battlefield. That's it? Ancient River, who was at the front of the cavalry, saw that the battle was over and was shocked. As far as he knew, there were no less than 6,000 Tatar cavalrymen who escaped from the Xian mansion. How could they be dealt with so quickly? General Gu, right? I am the new deputy commander of the army, Shibi. I have been waiting for you for a long time under the orders of the commander. This is Tulu City, and it is now officially in your hands. I hope you don't lose it. We are not willing to help you take it back every time. Shibi, who had followed Yang Chendong to the Xian manor, stood out once again. After greeting Gu he didn't wait for the other party to say anything before leading the army and leaving. In the entire city, other than the charred and black charcoal, there were also the corpses of the Tatar cavalry that had been placed neatly on the ground. Chiga's corpse was also among them. Chapter 863. This was a greeting gift from the new army to the Biming army on the orders of the 6th young master, or perhaps to Shi Wanshan. It was an extremely obvious gesture of goodwill, and the supply convoys of the mercenaries would be able to pass through unimpeded. Not long after, Shi Wanshan returned to Tulu and accepted this favor. He had the heads of the new army sent back to the capital of Biming. The news of the victory at the Xian mansion, the deaths of more than 10,000 enemies, the capture of more than 10,000, and the recovery of Tulu spread throughout the capital of Biming. The Daizong was overjoyed and made sure Wanshan, the commander of the Xian mansion army, as well as the commander of the all-encompassing capital. Some people who knew the inside story even released the news that as long as Shi Wanshan could make a new contribution, it was not impossible for him to be conferred the title of Earl. The great Ming dynasty had always had a saying that one could not be granted a title without military merit. Shi Wanshan's victory over the Tatar cavalry was equivalent to giving face to the Biming imperial court. If not for the fact that his seniority was still shallow, he would have been able to obtain the title of Count. Receiving the title of Commander meant that in the entire Xian manor, Shi Wanshan had become the one and only highest official. He was both excited and grateful. All of this had been done for him by the Duke of Loyal and Courageous, and he had to accept this favor. In the recently tidied Tulu Yamen, a guard half-kneeled in front of Shi Wanshan. Reporting, Yukan has come and said that he wishes to take his leave. Please invite Sir Yu. Reality had already proven Yukan's identity. Although it was still a mystery how he had learned of the situation outside, Wang Chong had no intention of pursuing the matter. Now was the honeymoon period between him and Yang Chendong. He would not let such a trivial matter cast a shadow on the relationship between him and Yang Chendong. Yukan had come alone, a bundle on his back, just like when he had left Tulu to follow the Biming army to the Xian mansion. Mr. Yu, are you leaving? Looking at his attire, Shi Wanshan immediately thought of something. Yukan's identity had been exposed. Given their current relationship, even if he stayed in Tulu City, no one would dare to do anything to him. However, vigilance was unavoidable. If that was the case, how could they carry out their work? Thus, Yukan's departure became inevitable. Yes, Kan is here to bid farewell to the commander. I believe you must have a message for the loyalty Duke. Yukan's expression was very calm as he spoke. About 2 hours later, Yukan left. His face was still as calm as before, making it impossible for others to see what he was thinking. Then, he rode out of the city and headed straight for the first city. It was already 2 days later when Yukan reappeared in the beginning city. He met the Security Bureau's director, Feng Liang, who was stationed in the beginning city. Haha, you're back. Well, you did a good job this time. Even the sixth young master praised you. Let's go. Since you're back, let's go see the sixth young master. He still has something for you to do. Feng Liang laughed and pulled Yukan's hand as they walked towards the Yang mansion. In the Yang mansion, the new army had withdrawn. They returned with a great victory in this battle, and a total of more than 20,000 captives had been sent to the logistics team. They were being screened and sorted out. It had to be said that the physical fitness of the Tatar soldiers was still very good. After a preliminary understanding, it was possible that 80% of them could continue to stay and join the army. This was already a very high proportion. As the logistics division's division commander, Beta Persei was standing beside Yang Chendong with a smile. The more captives and able-bodied men the logistics division had, the more confident he would be in doing things. Looking at Beta Persei's smiling face, Yang Chendong was too lazy to correct him. Speaking of which, the longer Beta Persei followed him, the more appropriate he would be in doing things. It could be said that Yang Chendong did not have to worry about him. Remember, as the logistics division commander, you must be impartial. I don't want anyone to come to me and complain about you. This time, the new army has more or less suffered some losses in this battle. Let them choose from the 5,000 people we prepared before, and let them replenish the organization. Yes, young master, I'll remember. Beta Persei kept nodding. One of the goals was to replenish the source of soldiers in time and restore the organization of the various divisions and regiments. Only when this requirement was met would the generals work harder in the war. They would not have to worry about the problem of too many losses after the battle. On the battlefield, they would dare to fight the enemy with their lives and fight big and fierce battles. Also, a new batch of supplies will soon be sent from Huragan City. There will be 200,000 Han people and 30,000 aspiring youths accompanying them. The food and accommodation of these people must be arranged as soon as possible. I'm not worried about the 200,000 people. We've already opened up 300,000 mu of barren land around the beginning city. It's enough for them to do whatever they want. However, we need to make good arrangements for the 30,000 young people. They can choose whether they're good at literature or martial arts. These are the future seedlings of Lengfeng. I'll leave their training to your logistics division. The Cold Front was the most powerful military force in Yangtze's forces. All the officers must be composed of Han people. Otherwise, such a powerful military force and the existence of foreign races would always be worrying. This was also a rule that Yang Chendong had set from the beginning. Understood. Young master, please don't worry. I will arrange these in advance. Beta Persei patted his chest with a reassuring look. After a while, there was the sound of footsteps outside the door. Yang Si appeared. Young master, Director Feng has brought team leader you can hear. Okay, let them in. Yang Chendong nodded, then looked at Beta Persei and continued. The new army is back. This time, the matter of dealing with the Gobi Mongolians will be handed over to them. Your logistics division is mainly responsible for the logistics this time. Beta Persei's face changed when he heard this. He thought that he would have the opportunity to go to war. He even prepared a reserve army of 5,000. But now, he was deprived of the right to go to the battlefield with just one sentence. It would be strange if he was happy. You don't know how many people are jealous of your position as the logistics division commander. If you are allowed to go to the battlefield, how will the other generals have the chance to perform meritorious deeds? Well, of course, if you must go to the battlefield, you have to hand over the position of division commander and let someone else take it. Yang Chendong was not unreasonable. He took the initiative to give Beta Persei a chance to choose. It was said to be a choice, but the result had already been decided. For the last battlefield, Beta Persei would not give up the position of logistics division commander. He had no choice but to lower his head and say, "Young master, then I'll just take care of the logistics." Well, young master is very happy that you have such awareness. This is called doing your job. As the first division commander, you have to set a good example. When someone takes over your position in the future, they won't think about going to the battlefield. Don't worry, there will be battles for you in the future. As for now, go and arrange the work I just mentioned. Yang Chendong said in a gentle tone. It was obvious that he valued Beta Persei. The last words made Beta Persei feel warm in his heart. He immediately saluted and left. He passed by Feng Liang and Yukin, who were entering the courtyard. Both sides nodded to each other as a greeting. The hero is back. As soon as he saw Yukin, who was following Feng Liang, Yang Chendong smiled and joked. Then he took the initiative to stand up from the chair and extend his arm. Seeing Yang Chendong stand up, Feng Liang and Yukin did not dare to be negligent. They hurriedly walked a few steps and came in front of him. They first saluted and then stretched out their hands. They looked very excited. Even Yukin, who was usually very calm when dealing with people, was flushed with excitement at this moment. This was the sixth young master, the founder of Yang Xie forces. In front of him, no Yang Xie member had any reason to be arrogant. Haha, have a seat. After shaking hands with Feng Liang and Yukin, Yang Chendong smiled and pointed to the two bamboo chairs placed opposite him. Then he picked up the Grassland King cigarettes on the stone table and gave one to each of the two people in front of him. Grassland King cigarettes were the latest products in Qiqian City. Considering that there was only one type of cigarette, which was too monotonous, they made a few more types according to Yang Chendong's idea. For example, the very ordinary Dahai and Blue Sky cigarettes. The Grassland King cigarettes were very advanced and were not for sale. They were only provided to some high-ranking officers. Hey, this Grassland King cigarettes are milder than the God of War cigarettes. I only got one, so I have to smoke it sparingly. Feng Liang smiled and helped Yang Chendong light the cigarette. The sincere smile on his face did not show the shrewdness and calmness that an intelligence officer should have. Okay, when you leave later, I will let you take two more back. Yukin's performance was also very good. When you leave, take two more. Yang Chendong seemed to be in a good mood and casually gave out 4 Grassland King cigarettes. Of course, the cigarettes were a small matter. The main thing was to express a friendly attitude. Sometimes, a small action could buy the hearts of many people. Feng Liang and Yukin immediately stood up to express their gratitude. Yang Chendong smiled and gestured for the two to sit back down. Then he looked at the latter and said, Yukin, this time your performance was very good. Tell me, what do you know about the Ming army? Yes, Yukin agreed. He then gave a summary report of what he had seen and the information his subordinates had gathered. According to Yukin, the combat power of the Ming army had increased compared to before. Perhaps it was because the Ming dynasty was divided into north and south, and the sudden rise of the mercenaries gave the emperor a lot of pressure. Now, not only did the military budget increase, but the social status of the generals also increased, especially since firearms were prepared for the army. If they fought with Yeshin, the Tomu Castle incident would not have happened. Chapter 864. Because of the Ming dynasty's martial prowess, many ambitious youths joined the army. In addition, the Great Ming dynasty had a large population, so the supply of soldiers wasn't a problem. It was inevitable that the army would grow stronger. Of course, there were still problems. For example, there were still some senior generals who embezzled the soldiers' pay. Fortunately, Shi Wanshan was an upright person, so this didn't happen often in the Xin mansion. There was also another major problem, which was the conflict in the heart of the Daizong emperor. He wanted to increase the army's fighting strength, but he was also worried that the army would become too powerful. One day, their achievements would overshadow the emperor, and they wouldn't listen to his orders. As a result, the power of the eunuchs in the army would grow. This was indeed a way to keep the generals in check, but at the same time, it also sowed a conflict. In the end, Yukin also said, Sixth young master, after this incident, Shi Wanshan's reputation has indeed shot up. It seems that he is unparalleled in the limelight, and many people have even joined the army out of admiration. This will be a great boost to the strength of the Xian Manor's army. However, once eunuch Deng Chong, who has a good relationship with him, is transferred away and replaced with someone who isn't of one mind, there will be more internal problems. It's unknown how much of their fighting strength they will be able to display. Yang Chendong listened carefully, not interrupting the other party's conversation. From time to time, he would nod in agreement. When the other party finally stopped talking, he nodded. Not bad. Yukin's analysis is very good. The sixth young master will remember these things and know what to do. This time your identity was exposed in Talu. Have you thought about where you'll be working next? It's all up to the sixth young master, Yukin said without missing a beat. This time, he had performed a meritorious service. Although he was only passing on an order, his courage to take risks was recognized. Most importantly, until he left, he didn't give himself away in the slightest. He didn't expose the radio station, so sure Wanshan still couldn't figure out where his information came from. This illusion was set up very well. This was one of the main reasons why he had performed a meritorious service. With this, there would be suitable arrangements for his next job. All right, you can go to North Korea next. Recently, their naval activities have been very frequent. They have repeatedly passed by our naval ships transporting supplies, and the distance between the two sides is getting closer and closer. If this goes on, I am afraid that sooner or later there will be a problem. Since we are going to fight, then we must first understand the situation over there. How about you be the director? Compared to his previous position as a team leader, the director was equivalent to a promotion. This was an affirmation of Kan's work and also a reward for him. Yukin immediately stood up and saluted. Sixth young master, please be at ease. I will definitely get a clear picture of the situation over there as soon as possible. Once the war starts, we will be the army's eyes and ears. Haha, good. Yang Chendong laughed with satisfaction. In the great Ming dynasty's Forbidden Sea, the strength of the sea was already very limited. This was especially so in Ming, where there was almost no navy. Due to geographical and environmental reasons, there were not many people who knew how to swim. Even if they wanted to establish a navy, there were many problems that needed to be solved. It was not something that could be accomplished in a short period of time. North Korea was different. They were originally close to the sea, and their naval industry had always been very developed. The commander of the 1st Naval Army, Gao Xiong, reported that recently when they were transporting supplies to the sea town, they had encountered the North Korean Navy several times. Although everyone restrained themselves and did not make a move, the other party's investigation was very clear. If one did not consider the future, there would be immediate worries. North Korea should be prepared for the problem. Yang Chendong sent Yukin over to do a deeper understanding and investigation. Yukin's appointment meant that Yang Chendong didn't need to worry about him. After the new army was replenished, Yang Chendong turned his attention to the Mongol tribes in the north of the desert. According to the information provided by the Security Bureau, the escaped Tuaya had already found the two generals, Na Risong and Baoyin. They quickly gathered 40,000 cavalrymen and went straight to the vicinity of Inma River. They used the slogan of protecting the king to start a war with Fan Yuhai. Fan Yuhai, who was already prepared, used the name of Sud Khan to wipe out the rebels. He brought 35,000 cavalrymen to engage in a bloody battle with Na Risong on the grasslands. Both sides suffered casualties, and they were now at a crucial moment in the battle. It's time to set off. After receiving the information, Yang Chendong called over Tiger's Mane, Xiao Feng, and the other generals. After a discussion, the armies set off a day later, heading straight for the Mongol tribe in the desert. Balsi and Tan, north of Inma River, was a temporary capital built at the end of the Yuan dynasty. In the current Mongolian East Province, west of Chobushan City, north of the middle reaches of Krillin River, Balsi Hot. At this moment, there was a cavalry war going on here. Both sides had tens of thousands of cavalrymen clashing in this area. The war had already lasted for 10 days, and there was no sign of it stopping. Fresh blood dripped onto the grasslands. From afar, it was a patch of red, like a sea of blood. One side used the name of Sud Khan to wipe out the rebellion, but they just wanted to steal the command of the Mongol tribe in the desert. The other side shouted that they wanted to save the emperor, to clean up the emperor's side. They wanted to take back the highest authority of the Mongol tribe in the desert and repeat the glory and prestige of the Golden Family. Both sides refused to give way to each other. The war went from a small-scale battle at the beginning, with only 60 to 70,000 cavalrymen joining. After 10 days, more and more small tribes joined for various benefits. The number of cavalrymen also continued to rise, reaching 100,000. Moreover, there was an endless stream of different powers joining the battlefield, causing the scale of this war to grow larger and larger, exceeding the expectations of both sides. Fan Yuhai originally thought that controlling Sud Khan was equivalent to controlling the lifeline of the Mongol tribe in the desert. When the time came, He only needed to marry Princess Tuaya, and with enough status, he could get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Then, he would shout out, and naturally there would be countless people responding. He would then have the confidence to challenge the mercenaries. In the future, he would even become one of the overlords of the grasslands, and it was not impossible for him to unify the grasslands. He never would have thought that something that did not seem very difficult would happen because Sud Khan faked taking medicine and told the truth to Princess Tuaya, causing her to suddenly escape. Although he had used this time to control some of the Mongol army, and with Sud Khan, it was equivalent to having a righteous cause and seemed to have the upper hand. However, he forgot one thing, and that was that everyone had ambition, especially the Mongol tribe in the desert. The army was not centralized, and they did not have any large cities to rely on. Over time, the Mongol tribe in the desert had long lost its military power, forming many small tribes and small powers. In the past, when Sud Khan was here, with his understanding of these small powers, he could still forcefully command them. But now, Sud Khan lay in bed every day, looking like he was just waiting to die. He did not care about any political matters, and the entire tribe was in chaos. It had only been 10 days since the start of the war, and there were already more than 10 leaders of small tribes who came to visit him. On the surface, they came to see Sud Khan, but in reality, they came to negotiate with Fan Yuhai, the true leader, to seek their own benefits. Some of the leaders of these small tribes only had a few hundred cavalrymen under their command, while others had 1,000 cavalrymen. The more powerful ones had thousands to thousands of cavalrymen under their command. The conditions they proposed were also based on their own strength. The stronger the leader, the more benefits they would ask for. On the other hand, the weaker the leader, the less benefits they would ask for. Some would even ask for 1,000 horses and sheep. Facing these leaders who came to negotiate with him, Fan Yuhai did not reject any of them. He didn't have that many resources in his hands, but it didn't matter. He had Sudur Khan in his hands, and he had righteousness. He gave away large tracts of land and fertile grazing lands just to win the support of these tribes. After all, the land was not his, and Fan Yuhai did not feel any heartache when giving out these things. Not to mention, he had a little plan in his heart. Once he defeated Tuaya's army and became the true Khan, he would be able to take back everything that he had given out. At that time, if anyone dared to resist, he would kill them. All along, Fan Yuhai had been a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. This was the case when he was in Jiaoji, and it was still the case now. The news of Fan Yuhai's generosity spread far and wide. Some of the leaders of the smaller tribes who had wanted to sit back and watch were also moved. They all came to Fan Yuhai's tent to ask for benefits. After they were satisfied, batch after batch of cavalrymen joined the camp. Fan Yuhai's forces grew bigger and bigger. There were strong and there were weak. In comparison, Princess Tuaya's side's development was a bit too slow. There were also people who came to ask for benefits, but Tuaya tactfully refused with a sentence, saying that everything would be decided by her father. However, she still did not forget to say that as long as someone helped her and her father, she would definitely be grateful. It was only a sentence of gratitude, without any concrete repayment. Naturally, the support she received was much less. Immediately, more and more small tribes went to Fan Yuhai's side, and it wouldn't be long before they announced that they would join their camp. Another few days later, the scouts at the front brought back news. Outside Fan Yuhai's camp, there had already been 3 successive expansions. Looking from afar, the number of cavalry had long been densely packed, impossible to count. When the news reached Princess Tuaya, the expressions of the 2 great generals who supported her, Narisong and Bao Yin, became extremely ugly. According to the current situation, if they were to fight with Fan Yuhai, they might not stand a chance. However, it was precisely at this time that a new piece of news arrived. The Mongol tribe's General Sahaba was currently leading 30,000 cavalry straight towards them. The front army's cavalry was already less than 10 li from them. Chapter 865. General Sahaba was in existence second only to Khan Sud in the Mongol Empire. 2 years ago, Sahaba's father died of illness, and he took over all military and political authority. However, this person did not immediately make any movements. instead maintaining an extremely low profile and managing the army and territory his father left behind. Because of his exceptionally low profile, his presence was very low, and he was gradually forgotten by others. Now that he suddenly appeared, and even brought 30,000 cavalry, it was clear that he was preparing to make his move. Is Big Brother Sahaba coming? That's great. Our relationship was already very good when we were young. He must have come to help us. Princess Tuaya, who received the news, walked out from her tent. Her haggard appearance completely changed, and her face was filled with anticipation and excitement. People always said that feelings when one was young were the purest. Perhaps only at that time friendship was not mixed with any distribution of benefits. Tuaya was filled with all kinds of expectations towards Sahaba's appearance. While waiting, even anxiously waiting, Sahaba finally arrived. Right at the entrance of the camp, Tuaya saw Sahaba, who was already close to 30 years old after being separated for 2 years. Right now, he seemed to have become even more mature. The extra beard on his face added a bit of manly charm. Big Brother Sahaba. Princess Tuaya welcomed him with a face full of joy. Little sister to Sahaba also welcomed her with a face full of smiles. The two stood together, and from afar, they actually gave off a feeling of a talented man and a beautiful woman. Princess Tuaya had great expectations towards Sahaba's arrival. After catching up, both sides sat down in the tent and then began to discuss the matter of the allied army. However, the greater one's hope, the greater the disappointment. It wasn't that Sahaba was unwilling to ally with Princess Tuaya. On the contrary, he took the initiative to bring up this matter. He expressed that he was willing to defeat the foreign Fan Yuhai together with them, save Khan Sud, and restore the glory of the Mongol Empire. However, at the same time, he also raised a request, and that was, if they wanted to send troops, there was a prerequisite, and that was that Tuaya must marry him. Sahaba finally revealed his fox's tail. According to what he said, he was still young, and his words had not reached the level where they carried enormous weight in the tribe. This request was also raised by the elders in his tribe. If he did not agree to their request, then he would not be able to ally with Tuaya and would not be able to send troops to help them. At first, Sahaba had a troubled look on his face. Regarding this, Tuaya still had hope and said that the marriage was fine, but couldn't everything be discussed after saving her father? After all, her father was still trapped in a coma. As his daughter, if she married someone else, a marriage without the blessings of her family would not be a happy one. Sahaba rejected the offer right away. He had to get married. Only then would the alliance between the two sides be unbreakable. Not only that, but the military power of both sides would be handed over to him in the end. This would be a great advantage for him to command the army better and defeat Fan Yuhai. If it was just a marriage alliance, Tuaya still had a glimmer of hope in her heart. But now, the other party even wanted to get their hands on military power. Even a fool could see what was going on. Tuaya did not immediately agree. Instead, she expressed that she needed to think about it. That night, Tuaya had a discussion with Narisong and General Bao Yin, and finally came to a conclusion. Sahaba and Fan Yuhai were the same. They were both ambitious people. Once they formed an alliance with them, it would be no different from asking a tiger for its skin. The nature of this peace talk had already changed. There was no need to continue. After coming to a conclusion, even though Tuaya was very disappointed, it could be said that one of her worries had been resolved. At least she knew one thing, and that was that in front of enormous benefits, nothing was reliable. No one would remain unchanged forever. Sahaba's appearance only gave her a deeper understanding of human nature. In the future, when she encountered things, she would have less hope and luck. That night, after making her decision, Tuaya slept very soundly. What she didn't know was that when she woke up the next morning, everything had changed. Just last night, General Bao Yin encountered an assassination attempt. His injuries were serious, and it was likely that he wouldn't live for long. Even more terrifying things had yet to come. Apart from the 5,000 cavalry under General Narisong and the 5,000 cavalry under General Bao Yin, who was in a daze, the other 20,000 cavalry officers that belonged to them had all thrown their lot in with Sahaba. Perhaps in the eyes of the grassland men, they didn't have the tradition of listening to women. In comparison, Sahaba was clearly more reliable than Princess Tuaya. He was more of a trustworthy person. She ran into Bao Yin's tent like a madwoman and saw General Bao Yin lying on the bed with a pale face. Among all the generals, Bao Yin had the best personal relationship with Tuaya. He was also the person she trusted the most other than her father. But now, they were going to be separated by life and death forever. Tears flowed down Tuaya's eyes uncontrollably. Princess, don't cry anymore. He's already dead. It's just that Tungri might like me a little more. That's why they urgently summoned me. At this time, Bao Yin still forced a smile. He reached out and used all his strength to place a commander's seal in Tuaya's hand. Princess, Bao Yin won't be able to accompany you in the future. I'll watch over you from the sky. You should do what you like. Don't force yourself. The grassland is still the world of men. Women should be protected. Bao Yin was dead. Before he died, he even said that he suspected that the assassin was sent by Sahaba. Otherwise, it was hard to believe that an assassin could pass through the heavily protected military camp and come to the core of the grassland to kill. Na Raizong had the same opinion. He was worried that he would be the next one to die, so he suggested to Tuaya that they should leave this place. He had 5,000 soldiers. Before Bao Yin died, he passed the military power to Tuaya, so he had another 5,000 soldiers. If they really wanted to charge out, it wasn't as if the 10,000 cavalry had no chance at all. Tuaya calmly rejected Na Raizong's idea of killing her way out. She did something unbelievable and walked into Sahaba's tent alone. Tuaya didn't want to agree to the conditions of the peace talks. She wanted to lay her cards on the table. She didn't say who was responsible for Bao Yin's death. She only expressed that she was tired of this place and wanted to leave temporarily. After Sahaba and Fan Yuhai had a winner, she might consider marrying the winner. But now, she didn't want to be involved in this matter. If Sahaba didn't agree, she would bring 10,000 soldiers and charge out. If that happened, it would only result in a situation where both sides suffered losses. Tuaya's sudden change in attitude made Sahaba seem as if he didn't know her. But it had to be said that he wasn't prepared to fall out with her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent people to assassinate Bao Yin, but directly sent troops to control them. Tuaya won. Under the threat of her life, she successfully brought Narisong and 10,000 cavalrymen who were willing to follow her out of the great tent. Apart from taking away some necessities, she was forced to leave behind most of the things for the similarly ambitious Sahaba. The situation gradually became clear. Sahaba replaced Tuaya and became the person who would compete with Fan Yuhai for the right to decide the grassland. When the two heroes met, a great battle was unavoidable. At this time, Yang Chendong led the new army and the ferocious Tiger Regiment across the Enma River and appeared at the edge of the battlefield. After the new army took down Tulu City, they quickly returned to the first city to rest and reorganize. Then, they replenished their manpower from the logistics division. After the organization was full, they followed Yang Chendong out of the first city. They passed through the Wandu city until they crossed the Enma River and arrived at the main battlefield. Along with them was the ferocious Tiger Regiment led by Xiao Feng. Although there weren't many of them, only 2,000 of them, they were made up of the most elite members of the Cold Front. In terms of combat strength, they weren't inferior at all. They were also Yang Chendong's greatest reliance in this battle. If only based on the number of soldiers, Yang Chendong's forces were probably the smallest. Fan Yuhai's methods were brilliant, and he was willing to offer great benefits. It didn't take long for him to unite more than 20 tribes of various sizes. The number of soldiers also increased from 35,000 to 120,000. Sahaba's many years of forbearance showed that this person was different. After he annexed Tuaya's 20,000 soldiers, he also reached an alliance agreement with some tribes of various sizes. In addition to the 30,000 soldiers he brought with him, the total number of soldiers reached 110,000. One was 120,000, the other was 110,000. Yang Chendong's new army and the ferocious Tiger Regiment were far from 30,000 soldiers. There was no doubt that they were the weakest, but who dared to look down on him? With the title of War God and the name of Longevity Heaven's Messenger, no one dared to look down on him. After the mercenary army crossed the Enma River, they found a very spacious place and stopped. With such a place, he didn't have to worry about others sneaking up on him. Just as the military tent was set up, Tiger's Mane walked into the main tent with an excited face. When he saw young Chandong, he saluted and asked for battle. Young master, when are we going to fight? Who are we going to fight first? Haha. Looking at Tiger's Mane, who walked into the tent, young Chandong smiled. Although Tiger's Mane had matured a lot after all these days of training, he was still a young man in his 20s. With a big battle before him, it was inevitable that he would act rashly. Yang Chandong only smiled and didn't say anything. This made Tiger's Mane very anxious. Young master, say something. Who are we going to fight first? When did I say we were going to fight? Looking at Tiger's Mane's anxious face, Yang Chandong shook his head lightly. Tiger's Mane, why didn't your deputy commander and Commander Xiao Feng come with you this time? The vice commander has to deal with some logistics matters, and Commander Xiao has to patrol the barracks. At this point, Ming suddenly froze. He finally understood why the sixth young master asked this question. Chapter 866. Seeing that Tiger's Mane had understood, Yang Chandong simply explained the matter. Your deputy commander didn't have something to do. He saw something and probably tried to dissuade you, but you didn't listen. As for Xiao Feng, he probably told you to wait for the young master's call, right? Young master. How did the young master know? Tiger's Mane was shocked. It's not that I know everything, but they are all smart people. They can predict what they will do in advance. As for you, of course, you're not stupid. It's just that you feel that you are too close to me, so you don't have to worry about anything. All right, you can go back. If there's anything you don't understand, ask your deputy commander and learn more. Yang Chandong waved his hand and reprimanded Tiger's Mane. Yang Si, who came out with the army, lightly patted Tiger's Mane and brought him out of the main tent with a confused expression. Tiger's Mane left the main tent and went to find the deputy commander. He finally realized how reckless his actions were. Commander, since the sixth young master is here, we must fight. But now that Fan Yuhai and Sahaba are in the middle of a battle, why should we make a move now? Letting them exhaust their strength for a while will only be beneficial to us. Tiger's Mane's face couldn't help but turn red when he heard the deputy commander's words. He wanted to win more battles and prove himself, but who would have thought that the more he wanted to, the easier it was to make mistakes. He immediately admitted that his impulsive request to fight was wrong, and even asked the deputy commander to teach him if there were any problems in the future. Facing the popular person beside the sixth young master, the deputy commander was flattered. He immediately said that if there were any problems in the future, he would discuss it with the deputy commander. No matter what, the mercenaries stopped moving after they appeared beside the river of Water Horse. Scouts from all sides reported that they spent their days either eating, sleeping, or training. It was as if they really treated this place as their training ground. When the news reached Fan Yuhai's ears, his face darkened, but there was nothing he could do. Fan Yuhai knew better than anyone how big of a threat Yang Chandong was. If there was one person in the world that he didn't want to fight, it would be Yang Chandong. It was just that fate made fools of people. Wherever he appeared, this person would appear. It was as if this person was born to go against him. Even though Yang Chengwang's cavalry was less than 30,000, Fan Yuhai had never underestimated them. In his eyes, this army was even stronger than Sahaba's 110,000 men. However, even though he knew this, he couldn't attack Yang Chandong right now. Fan Yuhai had no confidence in defeating Yang Chandong. 120,000 cavalrymen seemed to be on a grand scale, as if there was nothing they couldn't do. However, how many of them were actually just a motley crew? How many of them were disloyal to him? With such an army, it was easy to win a battle. Everyone would swarm forward and share the fruits of victory. However, if they lost the battle, the morale of the army would be greatly affected. If things went wrong, the army's morale would fall apart. At that time, not to mention conquering the grasslands, whether or not they could even leave this place alive would be another matter. Even though he knew that such a result was very likely to happen, if he still sent out his troops, then he wouldn't be the famous General Fan Yuhai, but a stupid pig. Forget it. I'll let you enjoy for a few days. Once I defeat Sahaba and unify the entire northern desert grasslands, it won't be too late to fight you then. Men, keep a close eye on the movements of the mercenaries. Report to me immediately if anything happens. In the end, Fan Yuhai still didn't make any preparations to fight Yang Chenong. Sahaba also made the same decision as Fan Yuhai. This person had long heard of the war god's name and knew that he wasn't easy to deal with. In the face of a great enemy, he naturally wouldn't be distracted. Not only did he not provoke the mercenaries, but he also sent people to meet Yang Chendong with generous gifts. It was as if the two sides would work together to eliminate Fan Yuhai first, and then they would share the Mongolian tribe in the north equally. Sahaba had a good plan. Who knew that Yang Chendong was so easy to get along with? You want to borrow his power to eliminate Fan Yuhai and then deal with the mercenaries? You're dreaming too much. Yang Chendong, who was very clear about this matter, handed the matter of the alliance to Deputy Commander Shi Bi. He believed that this person would understand his intentions. It was better to pretend to be polite first. As for whether they really wanted to form an alliance, it was not impossible. Everything would depend on the outcome of the battle. However, before the situation was settled, he wouldn't casually participate in the battle. With such an opportunity to exhaust the enemy, he wouldn't foolishly make a move. As for whether or not someone would make a move against him, if there really was someone who didn't want to live, then he might as well give it a try. He would definitely make that person regret it for the rest of his life. The Northern Desert Mongol War didn't stop because of the arrival of the mercenaries. On the contrary, it became more intense. Neither Fan Yuhai nor Sahaba could understand Yang Chendong's thoughts. They just wanted to end the battle quickly, finish the battle as soon as possible. After a victor was decided, then they could deal with the mercenaries who were eyeing them covetously. Under such pressure, the 200,000 cavalry fought on the grasslands for more than a month, from the beginning of summer to the middle of summer. Many areas that were originally rich with water and grass were dyed red with blood. In just a month, the number of dead and injured grassland cavalry had reached more than 100,000. More than 30 tribal leaders were either killed on the battlefield, or their subordinates were all killed. They became a commander without an army, a civilian. After more than a month, Fan Yuhai only had 40,000 cavalry left. Sahaba had 35,000 cavalry. The final battle was about to begin. In the deputy commander's tent of the mercenaries, the messengers sent by Sahaba were making all kinds of promises. There was only one thing they wanted, and that was in the upcoming battle. They hoped the mercenaries could help. Once Fan Yuhai was defeated, they could divide the grasslands equally. This wasn't the first time they had made such a request. But this time, the messengers sent by Sahaba had undoubtedly put in a lot of effort. They actually took out a detailed map of the northern desert Mongol tribes and marked out the details of dividing the grasslands equally. Among them, there were indeed some good locations that were allocated to the mercenaries. The sincerity of the messengers seemed to have moved the deputy commander. He showed a very greedy look and said, "These and those places are really for us?" The messengers looked at the messengers and calmed him down. He wasn't afraid of greed, but he was afraid that the messengers didn't ask for anything. Now that there was a need, the following matters would be easier to negotiate. Yes, since our general said so, then these places will be given to you after defeating Fan Yuhai. Good. Let me report to the war god. He will give us an answer later. She kept nodding her head. Before she left, she took a few more glances at that piece of land with a reluctant look on her face. Not long after, Sahaba appeared in the main tent. When he arrived, Yang Chendong looked up from his book. "Oh, Deputy Commander Sahaba, do you think it's time for us to attack?"
Yes.
Sahaba stood straight and replied, "I think that in the current situation, if we don't attack, both Fan Yuhai and Sahaba will have some misgivings. In the upcoming battle, they probably won't use their full strength. Now it seems that their strength has been weakened quite a bit, but after our scouts' investigation, not all of the 200,000 Mongolian soldiers died on the battlefield. Most of them retreated because they couldn't see the situation clearly." Yang Chendong looked up and frowned. "Continue."
Yes.
Shibi continued. In other words, the Mongol tribes in the north of the desert still have some fighting power. Once one of them becomes the final winner, it's very likely that more people will defect and join them if they call for help. If that really happens, even if we want to become enemies with them, it will be much more difficult. This is not in our interest. But if we can directly determine the victor through this battle, or even if we can inform both sides, we can avoid this situation to the greatest extent. Feeling the need to explain the situation in detail, Shirby continued, if we become the final winner, even if the Mongolian tribes in the north of the desert are dissatisfied, they won't be able to gather in a short period of time without someone to carry the burden. This will create time for us to defeat them one by one. At that time, we can pull in one group and fight another group. With a group watching from the sidelines, the problem here will be solved. Good. Yang Chendong slapped the armrest of the chair and stood up. Very good. Looks like Vice Commander Sahaba already has a plan in mind. That's very good. How about this? Tell me the details of the situation. If we agree to Sahaba's request and join forces with them, we can guarantee that we can deal a heavy blow to both sides and dominate. Yes, then Sahaba will tell the sixth young master. The plan is still not fully developed. If there are any parts that are not suitable, I hope the sixth young master can give me some pointers. Sahaba's face was also filled with excitement. No matter how good the idea was, it had to be approved before it could be realized. Now that Yang Chendong had said so, the success rate of this matter was undoubtedly higher. In the following time, the two of them chatted in the tent for a long time. Dinner was directly sent in. Even so, they still talked until the soldiers had gone to sleep. In the middle of the night, Sahaba and Tiger's Mane, as well as the leader of the ferocious tiger regiment, Xiaofeng, left the tent. Although it was already very late, the faces of the three officers were filled with excitement. It was obvious that this meeting was very successful, achieving their long-cherished wish. Chapter 867. On the second day, Sherbet woke up early. As the representative of the mercenaries in the negotiation, he finally gave the Sahaba emissary an accurate reply. The mercenaries supported the final battle and would stand firmly on Sahaba's side to deal with Fan Yuhai, an outsider. The messenger naturally left in high spirits. He returned to Sahaba's camp and reported the accurate information he just received. In the main tent, Sahaba laughed loudly. Good. It seems like the great Ming's loyal duke is very sensible. He knows that we are the orthodox and the ruler here. Yes. The messenger walked forward with a flattering face and said, even if the great Ming's loyal duke is powerful, it's only in the great Ming. Like us nomads, we don't even have a city. They won't pay attention to such a place. So in the negotiation, they only proposed that once they help us defeat Fan Yuhai, they hope that both sides will not invade each other in the future. If they are willing, they can even engage in friendly trade. Ha ha ha. It seems like the great Ming's loyal duke is also a person with ideas. He doesn't want to waste his energy on us. That's right. He has the Ming dynasty behind him. I think he should be very interested in the throne. Why would he look at a poor place like ours? However, there's no need to engage in trade. I heard that although their things are good, they are very expensive. If we need them, there's no need to buy them. We can just rob them. As for not invading each other, we will agree to it first. As for whether it will be forever, it will depend on the changes in the situation before we make the final decision. Oh, I wonder what the general means. The messenger seemed to not understand, but he also seemed to have understood. However, at this moment, in order to flatter, he pretended to ask for advice. The situation is always changing. If the great Ming's messenger comes and is willing to give us more things, then we might as well join hands with them to deal with this loyal duke. You have to know that the Han people have a saying that there are no eternal friends and no eternal enemies. There are only eternal benefits. Ha ha ha. Sahaba laughed happily at his own cleverness. The messenger on the side said in an exaggerated manner, "Brilliant, truly brilliant. General, you are young and promising. With your leadership in the future, our Mongol tribe in the north of the desert will become stronger. It is not impossible for us to recover the glory of Genghis Khan." Ha ha, ha ha ha. Sahaba, who was in a good mood, couldn't stop laughing. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and said, if you want to truly unify the Mongol tribes in the north of the desert, you have to be a member of the Golden Family. Otherwise, no one will acknowledge you in their hearts. By the way, is there any news about the search for Princess Tuaya? Not yet. I'm just afraid that even if we find her, she won't easily bow down to us. The emissary shook his head and said, Once Fan Yuhai is defeated and the Duke of Loyalty is chased away, there will only be a featherless Kagan left. He won't be able to pose any threat. Even if he can survive this final battle, whether he can survive or not is another matter. At that time, Princess Tuaya will no longer have a father, and many things will not be up to her to decide. At this moment, Sahaba had gradually revealed his foxtail and revealed his ambitions. Previously, when he allowed Tuaya to leave, it was not because he was afraid of her, but because he was not strong enough. If he fell out at that time, some people would inevitably think that he was too domineering and would not join hands with him. However, once he defeated Fan Yuhai and grasped the general situation, he would not have so many misgivings when doing certain things. How about this? Send out some people. You must find Princess Tuaya's location. Yes, General. This subordinate understands. The emissary nodded and quickly left. There was no one else in the tent, and Sahaba's face was gloomy. Duke of Loyalty, oh Duke of Loyalty, you're only us. You're willing to send troops to help me so easily. This is the strength of your Han people, but also your weakness. This time, I'll teach you how to be a person. Ha ha ha. It was no wonder that Sahaba was so excited. In the eyes of the Mongol people, the Han people were people with a broad mind, especially those who had the ability to become kings or emperors. Their Han people's Confucianism emphasized on having a broad mind, accepting all rivers into the sea, and helping the world and people. They preferred to provide help in times of need, as if only by doing so could they show their wisdom and greatness. This was both a strength and a weakness. Just like the Mongols of the past, when they were weak, they would ask for help from the Han people. As long as they put on a pitiful look and said a few words of flattery and worship, they would receive a lot of help. Once they became strong, it would be time for them to point their troops at the Han people. If they won, it would be a good thing, but even if they lost, it was not a big deal. At most, they would just lower their heads and admit their mistakes. After all, this was what their ancestors did, and it was not shameful. Clearly, this Duke of Loyalty had such an impression in Sahaba's heart. As for whether Yang Chendong would play any tricks, Sahaba did not think otherwise. The promises of the Han people were still very reassuring. Presumably, this Duke of Loyalty was a person with big plans and would not go back on his words. Of course, Yang Chendong would not go back on his words. Since he had promised Sahaba that he would send troops, he would definitely send troops. However, what kind of troops and how much effort was another matter altogether. Was Yang Chendong a Han? The answer was definitely yes. However, he was different from most Han leaders. He had a dark side in his heart, a cunning side, and even a black-bellied side. History had already told him how much he had suffered when dealing with foreign countries. As someone who came from the future, Yang Chendong would definitely not walk the same path as his ancestors. After doing something, they would regret it for the rest of their lives, and even harm their descendants. What he wanted to do was to do whatever was beneficial to him. As for whether or not it would attract the curses of others, he did not care so much. Who cared if the flood would reach the heavens after his death? What he wanted to do now was to lay down a solid and unshakable foundation for the Han people. As for the future generations who were ignorant and incompetent and wanted to lose this foundation, that was not something he could care about. He only needed to do his best. At the very least, the bigger the foundation, the slower the speed of squandering. At the very least, the Han people had once reached the peak of this world, so he could not be considered to have made a trip to this world. Under the scheming of each side, the weak alliance was formed, and the next thing to do was to wait for the day of the final battle. 4 days later, under Sahaba's deliberate pressure, in the grasslands 2 li west of Enma River, in front of the temporary capital built by Balsk and Tan at the end of the Yuan dynasty, his 35,000 cavalry faced off against Fan Yuhai's 40,000 cavalry. The sun was high up in the sky, shining down on every single one of the cavalrymen, giving them a very hot feeling. However, the 70,000 warriors acted as if they did not hear anything. At this moment, both sides were staring at each other. Crossbows and sabers were in their hands, and they looked like they were ready to make the final charge at any time. Fan Yuhai rode on his warhorse. Clad in full armor, he narrowed his eyes at the ferocious Sahaba. He did not know why, but he had a very bad feeling. Logically speaking, he had 5,000 more cavalrymen than the other side, and he should be more confident in himself. However, looking at the other side, Sahaba's face was clearly calm and composed. This was not the kind of confidence that was faked, but true confidence. Just based on this, the other side should have something to rely on. Could it be that he has invited another Mongol tribe to help him? Fan Yuhai thought so in his heart, but soon he shook his head. He didn't think that any tribe would be stupid enough to interfere when the outcome of the battle was still undecided. After all, preserving one's strength and waiting to reap the benefits should be what smart people and wise people would do. If this was not the reason, then what was the reason? Could it be that Sahaba was stupid? Did he really think that his 35,000 cavalrymen could defeat his 40,000 army? Unable to figure it out, Fan Yuhai felt very annoyed. He didn't like this feeling. He even regretted capturing Sud Khan and holding the emperor to order his vassals. Originally, he thought that this was a chance for him to control the Mongolian tribe in the north of the desert. Who would have thought that Suder would pretend to take medicine and deceive him? Then, Tuaya learned the truth and escaped. Finally, a reckless and difficult Sahaba jumped out. This person was like a cockroach. His vitality was extremely tenacious, and he liked to charge forward. In the face of absolute strength, many of Fan Yuhai's schemes could not be executed. Everything was so unsatisfactory, and in the end, it had reached the point where he had to fight with Sahaba. This caused Fan Yuhai to feel extremely annoyed. Fan Yuhai was more skilled in scheming and studying people's hearts. He hid behind the scenes and played tricks while others fought and killed in front of him. But now, he was forced to the front line, and it was a decisive battle. This was not what he was good at. Fortunately, Fan Yuhai still had a trump card, such as Sud Khan in his hands. This hostage was only useful on the battlefield. Now that the decisive battle was about to begin, it was time to push him out. Men, summon the Khan. Fan Yuhai's voice came out clearly from his mouth.
Yes.
General Zhang Ming replied and turned to leave. In a short while, Sud Khan rode onto the battlefield under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Suda's gunshot wound had long since healed. After all, it wasn't a serious injury, and the bullet didn't hit his body. If it wasn't for Fan Yuhai's tricks, he could have even stood up and led the entire tribe, looking for an opportunity to rise again. Chapter 868. However, under the current circumstances, Suda knew that the so-called rising of the Eastern Mountain was nothing more than a dream. Based on what Fan Yuhai had done to him, he hated him, and Fan Yuhai knew this as well. Fan Yuhai would definitely not let him live. The only reason he was still sitting on the horse was because he was still useful. As soon as Suda appeared, the cavalry opened up a path for him, allowing him to easily reach Fan Yuhai's side. Following this, the devil's voice sounded in his ears, "Go and shout. Tell them to put down their weapons and surrender with the identity of the Khan. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to betraying the entire Mongol tribe, and they would be killed without mercy. Don't think about playing any tricks, otherwise, I can guarantee that you will die miserably. Go." There was a smile on his face, but his words were incomparably vicious. When Suda heard this, he couldn't help but tremble. This person was a devil, and it was because of his existence that the Mongol tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert had been killing each other. Under the intense internal friction, the originally prosperous Gobi Desert Mongol tribes had suffered a huge drop in strength. He had never treated the Mongol cavalry as his brothers. He had only treated them as killing weapons in his hands. If such a person were to rule over the entire tribe, it would bring about disastrous consequences. The entire tribe might even fall into a state of eternal damnation because of this. This was what Suda was thinking, and it was also the conclusion that he had come to after these days of analysis. Hearing his reminder, Suda nodded and rode his horse forward. He stopped about 40 meters away from Zhao Hai. At this position, Suda could even feel a few crossbows pointing at him. If he dared to charge forward, he would immediately become a porcupine. Suda would not do such a risky thing. He did not think that he would be safe just because he had escaped to Sahaba's side. Sahaba was also a hungry wolf, and if there was a chance, he would also viciously take a bite out of him. Suda stopped his horse and looked up at the grassland sky. For some reason, at this moment, he felt that the sky was so blue, so clear, and so beautiful. However, all of this beauty was about to leave him. In his heart, he knew that this might be the last time he saw the blue sky of Mongolia. Longevity heaven, wait for me. Your believer is coming for you. Suitor, who was looking up, suddenly seemed to have changed into a different person. His fatigued look had completely disappeared, and his eyes shone brightly as he looked at the tens of thousands of Mongolian cavalrymen. Suddenly, he shouted out, "Warriors, you are the pride of our Mongolian tribe, and you are the future of our tribe. Now, as the Khan, I order you for the last time. Kill this devil behind me who is eyeing our foundation. Kill Fan Yuhai and avenge your dead brothers and loved ones. Kill." Suitor, who had just raised his arm, suddenly felt his back tighten. Then, a few more arrows landed on his body at the same time. Due to the arrows, his strength was rapidly draining away. Is it finally going to end? Suitor asked himself, but there was no pain on his face. Instead, there was a slight smile on his face. It was a smile of someone who had completely let go of everything and was completely relaxed. His life was finally coming to an end, but at the last moment, he exposed Fan Yuhai's wild ambition. It could be considered as his last contribution to the Mongolian tribe in the north of the Gobi Desert. He did not lose his dignity as a Khan. Longevity heaven, I'm coming. The Khan of the Mongolian tribe of Gobi had his life ended just like that. It also marked the end of an era. Suitor was dead, and one of the arrows was from Fan Yuhai, who was 40 meters behind him. He did not expect that this old man would be so fearless of death. He dared to say such words at the end. These words had greatly shaken the morale of his troops and could cause him to fall into eternal damnation. On the other side of the camp, Sahaba was laughing so hard that he could not close his mouth. Originally, he was still thinking about how to deal with Suitor after this victory. He would definitely not allow such a person to step on his head, so killing this person was something that had to be done. The difficult part was how to kill him silently and not have anything to do with him. For this, he had given orders to many of his generals to do it secretly. Now, he did not need to think about it anymore. Fan Yuhai had done what he wanted to do the most for him. Now, he just needed to use this momentum to take the initiative to send out his troops. Warriors of the grasslands, you've all heard the Khan's final words. This Fan Yuhai is a foreign race, and his existence is a disaster for our tribe. Now, the Khan has used his life to tell us the truth. Now, let's kill this demon together. Kill. Kill. The 35,000 Mongol cavalry all roared out, and the vanguard of the 10,000 cavalry charged towards Fan Yuhai's army. Dust flew into the air, and the final battle had begun. Fan Yuhai's face was ashen. The development of the situation was completely out of his expectations. Suitor's appearance made him feel like he had smashed his own foot with a rock. But now that things had come to this, there was no point in saying anything. At this moment, he raised the saber in his hand and pointed it forward, shouting, "Brothers, let's kill together. We have more people than them. As long as we win this battle, everyone will enjoy endless glory and wealth. Here, I swear to everlasting heaven that I will never let you down. Kill." General Lu Duo took this opportunity to shout, and led the 10,000 vanguard cavalry who had already disobeyed Shangda Khan to charge forward. Fan Yuhai swore a deadly oath, and barely managed to stabilize the morale of his troops. But he knew that this was far from enough. After all, Suitor's identity was there. After being the Khan for so many years, his influence on the entire tribe must be huge. But it did not matter. As long as he could defeat Sahaba and use facts to prove everything, there was still a chance for him to turn the tables. 20,000 cavalrymen clashed on the vast grasslands. Sabers and spears clashed. Drums sounded like thunder. The cavalrymen surged on the battlefield, and the smell of blood filled the air. Sahaba watched as the 10,000 cavalrymen charged into the formation but did not gain any advantage. He could not help but ask the messenger beside him anxiously, "Didn't you say that the Duke of Loyalty agreed to work with us? Why haven't we seen them yet?" This. The messenger was sweating profusely. He did not know how to explain himself. Don't tell me they were scared away." Sahaba scolded angrily. "Oh no, they have sent more troops. At this moment, a general shout attracted Sahaba's attention. As expected, Fan Yuhai had increased the number of troops again. Perhaps Fan Yuhai also knew where their advantage lay. It was precisely the additional 5,000 cavalrymen. Based on this alone, they could completely use this advantage to completely defeat Sahaba. Only by doing so could they eliminate the negative effects of Su Da's words before his death. We will send more troops too. Then immediately send someone to contact the Duke of Loyalty. What are they doing? At this point, Sahaba had no other choice. He could only accompany Fan Yuhai in sending more troops. But he did not forget to ask for Yang Qindong's help. This was his trump card. With the agreement of both sides, another 10,000 soldiers were sent into the battlefield. It was said that more than 10,000 soldiers were boundless. At this moment, 40,000 cavalrymen were fighting together. The scene was spectacular. It was fortunate that this was the grassland. The source of the earth was vast. Otherwise, even if these people stood there without moving, they would not be able to stand on any ordinary terrain. The sound of fighting continued. Every moment, there would be a grassland warrior falling off his horse. Every second, there would be a life lost. Human life was precious, but sometimes, it was also fragile. Just like in war, human life was always the most worthless existence. A general's success was built on the death of 10,000 soldiers. Often, a victory was built on the blood and lives of countless people. It was so tragic. It could be said that those who had never fought in war would never know the preciousness of peace. True peace also required countless martyrs to pay the price of countless lives in exchange for it. At this point, as a retired Special Forces soldier, Longzi expressed his highest respect to the martyrs of the revolution. On the battlefield, the chaotic battle continued. It had been more than 6 hours, but both sides were still locked in a stalemate. Neither side had a strong advantage. The stalemate continued. Sahaba was like an ant on a hot pan. He was extremely anxious. The reinforcements had not arrived yet. If the battle continued, he was afraid that he would be the one to lose. However, what he didn't know was that 50 miles away from them, the mercenaries were slowly making their way over. According to Yang Qindong himself, he would form an alliance with Sahaba and send troops. But when the troops would be sent was up to him. Sahaba obviously wanted to use him. He even wanted to take care of him after defeating Fan Yuhai. Since that was the case, how could he let others do as they wished? He was a person who was not afraid of things getting out of hand. So, he was quite satisfied with the delayed reinforcements. Oh, it meant that it was quite slow. Send someone to inform Sahaba that we're already on our way to the battlefield. We'll be there soon. Tell him to hold on. Riding on the white dragon horse, Yang Qindong looked at the midsummer scenery of the grassland while speaking with a relaxed expression. Yes. Instead of saluting, he immediately arranged for a scout to go ahead and report first. Beside Yang Qindong, Tiger's mane laughed loudly. Young master, you are the one who is really watching from the sidelines. But if Sahaba were to know that while we were aiding them, we also sent people to destroy their rear rations, I'm afraid he would have the heart to kill us. Ha ha ha. Chapter 869. That's right. Just now, the new direct subordinate regiment was sent out. Their target was the supply base behind Sahaba. Once they occupied that place and the news spread, the military camp would definitely be shaken. One could only imagine what kind of expression Sahaba would have. You can't blame the young master for being ruthless. They were the ones who targeted me first. Do they think it's that easy to hire us mercenaries? How can I not get some interest? Yang Qindong said leisurely as he rode on his horse. When the corps officers of the new army heard this, their hearts trembled. In the future, no one should ever think of messing with the sixth young master. Otherwise, the consequences would be very dire. Of course, they were also glad that they were the sixth young master's men and not his enemies. The army was still advancing at a steady pace. Every 15 minutes, there would be scouts coming to report the situation at the front. From this, it could be seen that Yang Qindong was still paying attention to the situation at all times. Once there was any hint of deviation from his plan, he would immediately adjust the military deployment. He walked slowly and saw that it was already afternoon. In another 2 hours, it would be evening. He looked at Tiger's mane and asked, "How is it? How's the new army's night training? Can you ensure that the night's battle is normal?" "No problem." Tiger's mane patted his chest and replied, "Our soldiers' meals are good and their nutrition can keep up. There are no longer any problems with night blindness. In addition to the recent assault training, although they still can't attack as freely as they can during the day, fighting at night and killing the enemy is no longer a problem." "Good, that's good. Tonight, there should be a chance for you to perform." Yang Chendong nodded happily. Now that everything was ready, all he had to do was wait for the sky to turn dark, and he would charge into the battlefield and show off his skills. However, as the saying went, plans can't keep up with changes. Just as Yang Chendong led the army to the battlefield, a scout suddenly reported that a third force had suddenly charged into the battlefield. There were at least 10,000 cavalrymen, and they were attacking Fan Yuhai together with Sahaba. Now, this famous general was forced to send another 10,000 cavalrymen to the battlefield to stabilize the situation. A third force? Who is it? This change was out of Yang Chendong's expectations. He didn't think that anyone would join the battle at this time. Before the outcome of the battle was decided, who would be so stupid to do something that would not benefit them? "I don't know. We're still investigating." The scout shook his head. He couldn't answer this question. "Investigate again." Yang Chendong's expression became much more serious. While he dismissed the scout, he also ordered the army to speed up some things. The sudden change had disrupted his plans. He had no choice but to arrive at the battlefield ahead of time. Only in this way could he deal with the changes by remaining unchanged. Fortunately, not long after, the scout brought back new information. The situation of the new force that had joined the battlefield had been clarified. It was Princess Tuaya. "It's her." When he heard the news, Yang Chendong's expression quickly became as calm as before. He said, "She must have wanted to save her father. Unfortunately, Fan Yuhai's movements were too fast. She was still a step too late." "This, sixth young master, if this is the case, I'm afraid that Princess Tuaya will risk her life against the enemy. She only has 10,000 cavalrymen. If placed on the battlefield, she won't be of much use. Besides, with Sahaba's character, he will definitely treat her and her cavalrymen as cannon fodder. You see, beside him, Shibi also considered the seriousness of the problem." "That's right." Yang Chendong nodded his head. In his plan, Tuaya had nothing to do with this battle. This woman was prepared to be dealt with at the very end. However, since the battlefield had changed, he also had to change accordingly. "How about this? Immediately order the recruits at the vanguard to speed up and rush to the battlefield as soon as possible. Tell them to do their best to protect the two wings of Princess Tuaya's army. Everything will be decided when the army arrives." "Understood." Shibi nodded her head and urged her horse forward. At this moment, on the battlefield, as Yang Chendong expected, Sahaba had indeed treated this woman and the cavalrymen she brought with her as cannon fodder. When faced with Fan Yuhai's reinforcement of 10,000 cavalrymen, not only did he not increase the number of troops, he instead ordered the cavalrymen to retreat as much as possible, leaving the main battlefield to Tuaya and Fan Yuhai's cavalrymen. Sahaba's plan was naturally good. He would first allow these two opponents to fight. When the time came, regardless of which side was exhausted, it would be a good thing for him. Originally, this plan was left for the mercenaries. However, since they hadn't arrived yet, he decided to let Tuaya have a taste of this feeling first. On the battlefield, Tuaya and Na Risong led 10,000 cavalrymen and continuously rushed forward. Facing Fan Yuhai's cavalrymen, they didn't retreat a single step. The decisive battle was about to begin. Tuaya naturally had inquired about the situation long ago. Her initial thoughts could be said to be the same as Yang Chendong's. Both of them wanted to take advantage of this dogfight to make their move. If they could use this opportunity to rescue Sud Khan, that would naturally be the best thing to do. No matter how much she thought about it, she didn't expect Sud Khan to stop enduring at the final moment. Not only that, he even angered Fan Yuhai with his words and was shot to death on the battlefield. When Tuaya, who was also several tens of li away, learned of this misfortune, she almost fainted. Soon after, she led her army and rushed over without any regard for anything else. She wanted to kill Fan Yuhai with her own hands and avenge her father. Tuaya's appearance on the battlefield a step ahead had indeed caught both sides unprepared. It was just that one side was endlessly happy, while the other was cursing his bad luck. Brandishing her blade, she charged forward on the battlefield like a man. Tuaya, who had been practicing horsemanship since young and even had several masters, indeed had the side of a woman. After just a few charges, she had already lost 3 cavalrymen. However, she still didn't feel tired and continued to charge forward on her horse. Even if she wanted to kill, the number of cavalrymen under Fan Yuhai's command was too great. A total of 30,000 cavalrymen had been sent out. Even if there were some casualties, the remaining number wasn't something Tuaya could compare to. Coupled with Sahaba's intentional retreat, Tuaya's army was already very close to being surrounded. Princess, that son of Ab*Th Sahaba has retreated his army behind us. We are about to be surrounded. Na Song brandished his blade and cut down another cavalryman. He then came to Tuaya's side and spoke with a slightly nervous tone. It's fine. In this matter, we have the same goal as Sahaba. As long as we are really in danger, he will definitely save us. He only wants to exhaust us, not eliminate us. So tell the brothers to just charge forward. Tuaya's face didn't reveal the slightest bit of fear. At this moment, the hatred for her father's death had already filled her heart. She even had the will to die and only thought of killing Fan Yuhai. She didn't care about anything else. Tuaya had already gone crazy. Na Song could only shake his head and smile bitterly when facing such a princess. He then said to the bodyguards beside him, "No matter what, we have to protect the princess's safety. If it really doesn't work, we will kill our way out." Understood. The other bodyguards nodded in agreement. They then guarded Tuaya's left and right so that she wouldn't be disturbed and wouldn't have to worry about the safety of the flanks. Even though the protection was already very thorough, Tuaya's army still started to suffer large-scale casualties in the face of Fan Yuhai's army that was at least twice their size. When the military strength was inferior and the combat strength was equal, the side with more people would usually have the advantage. Charge! Just as Na Song was about to consider whether or not they should retreat and forcefully leave with Princess Tuaya, another cavalry troop appeared not far away. Looking from afar, their uniform military green uniforms were like a green sea as they charged toward the center of the battlefield. The first batch of mercenary reinforcements finally appeared. The one leading the troop was the new army's division commander, Lu Zhua. All of the 6,100 men under him moved out and rushed over. The first lineup was the new army division. This was Yang Qindong's idea. He didn't want Sahaba to see through his real situation. The first army to be sent out was also the weakest. The new army division appeared. They didn't adopt the strategy of fighting at the tip of the arrow. Instead, they maintained a cavalry formation with 400 men in a battalion. They scattered the cavalry that Fan Yuhai had arranged on the periphery and rushed into the formation, arriving at Princess Tuaya's side. Then, the army slowed down and maintained contact with each other, protecting the princess's safety. It's the mercenaries. When he saw these special military uniforms, Na Song recognized their identity. But what he didn't expect was that they actually came to protect the princess. When he saw that apart from the front, the left and right wings, as well as the back, there were organized mercenary cavalry troops protecting them, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Naturally, Princess Tuaya also noticed the newcomers. At first, she still held her blade horizontally in front of her, assuming a defensive stance. From a certain perspective, she and Yang Qindong were still enemies. Who knew if they would attack her when they appeared? The battle situation changed once again. When Fan Yuhai saw this from the rear, his expression became even more unsightly. Originally, he was still very confident in dealing with Sahaba alone. Even if Princess Tuaya's 10,000 men were added, he still wouldn't be afraid. After all, this kind of allied army wasn't united, so there was a chance to break them down one by one. But now, the sudden appearance of the mercenary army made him feel an enormous pressure. Others didn't know about the strength of the mercenary army, but he had experienced it a long time ago. He was a witness to the destruction of Jiaoji. It was also at that time that he became an orphan and began to wander the world. Now that his old enemy was in front of him, Fan Yuhai really wanted to fight to his heart's content and avenge the enmity of that day. But in the end, reason won over impulse. He didn't have the confidence to fight 1 against 3. Pass down the order. Slowly retreat. Do your best to leave the battlefield and look for an opportunity to fight again. Chapter 870. Fan Yuhai was still able to see the big picture. When he realized that the situation wasn't good, he didn't waste words or think too much. All he did was to protect himself. When Sahaba finally saw the mercenary reinforcements appear, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. This was a chance to deal a heavy blow to the mercenaries. He quickly ordered his cavalry to retreat and watch the battle from the sidelines. Before he could give the order, he suddenly realized that Fan Yuhai's cavalry was retreating frantically, wanting to leave the battlefield. How could Sahaba let that happen? If he couldn't take down this powerful enemy today, it would be even more difficult to find such an opportunity in the future. Send 10,000 cavalry to the enemy's flanks. No matter what, we can't let them escape. The rest of you, charge with me. Sahaba finally made the decision to charge with the entire army. In his eyes, the mercenaries and Tuaya were far less of a threat than Fan Yuhai. Sahaba's entire army moved out. The cavalry that had just retreated once again charged onto the battlefield. They attacked together with Tuaya and the mercenaries, chasing after Fan Yuhai's army for a long time. With the 3 parties joining forces, the pressure on Fan Yuhai's army, which originally had a slight advantage, increased greatly. Their military strength was inferior, and their morale was inferior. The control of the battlefield quickly changed hands. From the initial planned retreat, it became a real retreat. Hold on, hold on. Fan Yuhai saw the sudden change in the situation. Facing the pressure of the 3 parties, he knew that he would definitely lose if the battle continued. He had no choice but to shout in a futile attempt to stabilize the situation. At the same time, he called for Zhang Ming and Lu Duo to discuss the matter of breaking out of the encirclement. We can't. The battlefield is extremely disadvantageous for us. The morale of the soldiers has been shaken. If we continue fighting, we will definitely lose. We have to break out of the encirclement before they reach us. After calling for the 2 generals, Fan Yuhai immediately announced his decision. All right, we will break out of the encirclement. Although they were unwilling, they no longer had the right to choose. Fortunately, they had been prepared for this. The 5,000 cavalry that Fan Yuhai had with him from the beginning had been used as a backup. Now was the time to put them to use. Under the lead of the 2 generals, Zhang Ming and Lu Duo, the 5,000 cavalrymen once again began to flee. Once upon a time, Fan Yuhai had relied on these people to successfully slip away from the eyes of the mercenaries. When 2 small countries were destroyed and the alliance of 3 small countries was defeated, he was still unharmed. Unfortunately, this time, they were facing the grassland cavalry that was determined to kill them. How could it be easy for them to escape? Since they were all cavalrymen, their advantage in speed was gone. Even though these 5,000 men were extremely elite, regardless of weapons and equipment, they were superior to ordinary cavalry. However, when faced with Tuaya, who was bent on vengeance, Lu Zhua, who had received his orders, and the Sahaba army who wanted to eliminate this calamity, they only managed to charge out for less than a li before they were entangled again. Moreover, the cavalry behind them was still increasing in number. General, please leave. Leave this place to me. At the crucial moment, Zhang Ming took the initiative to step forward. He led 3,000 cavalrymen to bring up the rear, blocking off the Mongol pursuers behind them. Take care of yourself. Lu Duo, let's go. After saying such a meaningless sentence, Fan Yuhai turned around and left. In his eyes, the life and death of others were never important. The most important thing was whether he could survive or not. Zhang Ming stayed behind, using his body to block off the 3 armies. He used his flesh and blood to build a great wall, fighting to the death without retreating an inch. He created layers of obstacles for the 3 armies, angering Tuaya so much that she screamed crazily. However, there was still no trace of him. Even though the recruits trained hard, most of the soldiers lacked battle experience. Facing Zhang Ming and his elites, they could not exert much strength. This scene was seen by Sahaba, who was following behind them. It was said that the mercenaries were strong, good at fighting, and had excellent equipment, especially their commander, Duke Zhengdan, who was well versed in the art of war. It was difficult for him to lose. However, when he saw it for himself, Sahaba's heart was completely at ease. He did not know about the others, but at the very least, the strength of the mercenaries in front of him was very ordinary. There was still a large gap between their strength and his estimation. If that's the strength of the mercenaries, then it's not a big deal. Men, gather the prisoners on the battlefield. We need to strengthen ourselves. General, aren't we going to give chase? One of the Kiliarchs asked with a perplexed expression. Chase my ass. There's no chance now. It's more important to strengthen ourselves. Sahaba shook his head. Fan Yuhai's escape was already beyond his reach. Since that was the case, why not face reality and strengthen themselves first? With the order given, Sahaba's army stopped chasing and started to surround the Mongol cavalry that Fan Yuhai had left behind. With the pressure in front of him reduced, Zhang Ming had finally completed his mission and created enough time for Fan Yuhai to leave. However, after a bitter battle, he did not have many soldiers by his side. When Nadersong and Luge would join forces to attack him, after several clashes, his chest was slashed by a sharp saber, revealing the white bones inside. Zhang Ming was seriously injured. Narisong and Luge was struck while the iron was still hot. They attacked him continuously, adding new wounds to his left and right arms. Just when he didn't even have the strength to pick up his saber, Tuaya appeared in front of him. It was this Zhang Ming. Normally, he used the excuse of protecting her father's safety, but secretly spied on her. Tuaya had long hated this person. Since he couldn't catch up to Fan Yuhai, he might as well make an example out of this person. He raised the shiny saber high up and brought it down ruthlessly. Zhang Ming was dead. Fresh blood splattered on Princess Tuaya's face. It was warm, but it also carried her tears. With Zhang Ming dead, the resistance of Fan Yuhai's troops immediately fell into disorder. Other than half of the cavalry who escaped when they saw that the situation was not good, the rest were surrounded by Sahaba's troops and were forced to surrender. At this moment, Sahaba was no longer satisfied with these ordinary captives. He set his sights on Princess Tuaya. Su Dining became the Khan of the Mongol tribe in the north of the desert and was respected by the people. Very few people rebelled. The biggest reason was that he had the blood of the Golden family flowing in his body, which was why he was recognized by everyone. If Sahaba wanted to lead these Mongol tribes, there were only two paths he could take. The first was to kill these tribes until they trembled in fear, and then use his powerful strength to force them to surrender. However, in this way, the Mongol tribes in the north of the desert would be greatly weakened. Once other great powers got involved, it would be difficult to resist the enemy. The second path was much more peaceful. He only needed to marry Tuaya and let their child become a Khan. In this way, it was equivalent to having the power of the bloodline. Naturally, he would have a powerful rallying power. How could Sahaba not be moved when he could get a beauty and also obtain great power? Now that the situation was settled, it was the best time to capture Tuaya. Therefore, his army surrounded her. Because Lu Zhua was too close to them, he was unfortunately surrounded as well. Haha, little sister Tuaya. Now that the situation is settled, the murderer of the Khan has been beaten to death by my army. Your great hatred can be considered avenged. Thinking about it, a girl like you must have had a hard time. Why don't you come to my tent and take a short rest? Sahaba continued to flatter himself, shamelessly speaking. How could Tuaya not see through Sahaba's little tricks? If it was said that she originally had a good impression of this childhood friend of hers, it had disappeared in the battle just now. He actually allowed her and Fan Yuhai to fight to the death. Not only did he not help, he even ordered his troops to retreat. If it wasn't for the timely appearance of the mercenaries, most of the cavalrymen she brought with her would have been killed. At that time, would he still be so courteous with her? Many thanks for General Sahaba's good intentions, but my father's blood hatred has not been completely avenged. Fan Yuhai is still fleeing, and I still have to lead the army to chase after him. I will come back to thank the general when I have the chance in the future. Tuaya threw down these words and prepared to leave. Wait. Seeing that Tuaya had actually rejected him, it was clear that she refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Sahaba finally revealed his true colors. Little sister Tuaya, I will immediately send people to handle the matter of chasing after him. I believe that it won't be long before there is news. Now, please come to my tent to rest. Min, please come with the princess. Who dares? Since the soft approach didn't work, he had to use the hard approach. Without waiting for the cavalry to move, Narasong shouted and came to Tuaya's side, standing with his sword. After this battle, although their strength had been damaged, they still had more than 6,000 cavalry. It was enough to kill a bloody path out. Oh, little sister Tuaya, must you reject my good intentions? Don't you know who has the final say now? Do you really think that you can break out of this general's encirclement with just your cavalry? Or do you think that these people are willing to give their lives for you? Sahaba said in a mocking tone. His gaze then landed on the cavalry that followed Tuaya. I don't care what you have done before, but now, I want to take the princess as my wife. As long as you don't stop me, no one will do anything to you. Think about it, you are just ordinary soldiers. Is it worth it to give up your lives for a fallen person? Suda Khan is already dead. Who can see your loyalty? Sahaba did indeed have some ability. He knew the importance of people's hearts. At this moment, when he suddenly said such words, the situation suddenly changed. The cavalry that was brought by Tuaya and Narasong all had complicated expressions. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.